Good news, bad news, yin and yang, right? Bad news, Pacers lost last night to New York. Good news, they have 2 more chances to close out the series. Bad news, you could kind of tell from the get-go that things weren't going to go great. Good news, I got to watch the game at Britton Tavern at 141st in Cumberland, right off of 37 up in Fishers, courtesy of our friends at Anheuser-Busch and Mick Ultra Zero. And tons of cool people showed up. Tons of them.
I didn't show up, Jake. I don't know what you're talking about.
My point exactly. We had my lovely group from Jasper. It was awesome. We had Andy that showed up. Awesome. We had a fabulous couple, including one of our 22 female listeners who is an Uber driver and her son from Detroit. Awesome. They were probably the most fun. My buddy Wesley Rayner that I grew up with, went to Eastwood with them, went to North Central with them. I turn around and, there's Rayner. Sat and chatted with him forever. It was great. It was fun. But the game itself, a disappointment. And here's more good news, bad news. The good news for Indiana is going into that game, they had been in that situation before. A chance to close out a series on the road in a Game 5 against a team that they'd just beaten at home. But the bad news is, and this is the big factor, last night the Indiana Pacers assumed that the New York Knicks had the same emotional fragility, psychological weakness that Cleveland has. And that's not to throw Cleveland under the bus, but the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are very talented and had a wonderful season, if there's one thing they lack, it is veteran maturity as a basketball team. And I think the Pacers went in last night thinking in their mind, and I kind of understand it, in anything that we do, we resort back to when we've been in that situation before. And we compare it to like scenario. And when the Pacers went into that game, I think they went in with a confidence level that as long as they hung around, that New York would kind of wilt or pack it in the way Cleveland did in Game 5 in Cleveland. This team's different. Say what you want about there's a level of grit, and maybe to an extent, I'm saying that because of all that goes into just New York in general. You know, when I watch games in the Garden, there's something about the Garden, even though it's like the 7th installment of Madison Square Garden. In other words, that ain't the building Joe Louis fought in. It's been moved several times since then, rebuilt, etc. But nonetheless, there's something about the matinee aspect of Madison Square Garden that feels bigger, that feels more marquee. Like I said yesterday, it is so fitting that the Pacers are playing in the Eastern Conference Finals against the New York Knicks. There's nobody else you'd rather play against because it means more than if they were winning Game 6 on the road in Orlando or Atlanta or Charlotte. It's New York. But there's this element of New York when you think about all that you're up against. It's beyond just the Knicks. It's the aura of the bright lights, big stage, Broadway, pressure, media capital of the world. Everybody's watching, all of those things. And so when you go into the game, you have to know, and maybe it's just by suggestion and all of that, that the franchise you're playing has that level of like the grit, rat race, competition of New York. If you've ever lived in New York, everything in New York is a competition. Subway stops, the doors are about to open, there's 1,000 people trying to get off the train, there's 1,000 people trying to get off on the train, and you're literally staring people down like, okay, well, I'm getting on that train, I know you got to get off, but like, how are we going to do this? Everything's a competition, and there's just a grit about New York. And so you had to know, in your mind, you feel like that means that the Knicks are going to have that same level of grit. And not every Knicks team has had that over the years, obviously. They've been stuck in futility for the most part. But this group does. Jalen Brunson, say what you want. You don't have to like the guy. He's a tough-as-nails player. Karl Anthony Towns was a game-time decision. And on more than one occasion, as I was watching it, Eddie, you probably saw it. I mean, how many times did you see Karl Anthony Towns where you're like, that's it, he's coming out? He's favoring that knee. He rubbed on it several times. You know, it was laborious watching him, but yet he was his same effective, fluid self, right?
I thought he was more dominant last night than he had been in some of the other games outside of that fourth quarter in Indy when New York won. I thought he was much more decisive when he got the ball. He didn't try to slowly, methodically work his way to the basket. Once he caught it, I think he realized that Indiana was doubling as soon as he put the ball on the floor, so he just immediately attacked the basket. And like I said the other night, that the conundrum that Indiana has when they run Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns together is you're either forcing Miles Turner to come out and you're taking him away from the rim and it's going to result in a lot of points in the paint, or you put Pascal on him and is going to just go right by Pascal because he's got the mobility like Pascal, but he's also got more size and physicalness to him, just because I think Cat is a one-of-one type of center in the league, and I think a lot of people forget that he is such a dynamic offensive center.
Now, here's where Indiana fell short. Pacers lose last night by 17. Good afternoon to you on a Friday. It is a Friday. Again, good news, bad news. It's good news. It's Friday. Jake Query here along with Eddie Garrison. It's Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Jeremiah Johnson going to join us 1 o'clock from, of course, the FanDuel Sports TV network that covers the Pacers in the regular and first round of the postseason. He'll join us at 1 o'clock. Kevin Bowen at 2. But let's get to this. Here's where the Pacers lost that game. Credit to Benedict Mathurin. Benedict Mathurin had a nice game. He was good from the free throw line. He was aggressive. He was Benedict Mathurin that you need and want to see. But what you want to see is Benedict Mathurin getting 23 off the bench on a night that is complementing what the starters are doing, not carrying and compensating for what the starters are not doing. And he last night, you're not going to win a lot of games. If you're the Indiana Pacers, you are not going to win many games where Benedict Mathurin's made field goals match the combined total of Aaron Nesmith, Andrew Nembhard, and Tyrese Halliburton. And that's what happened. The Knicks completely neutralized Tyrese Halliburton. And Andrew Nembhard, we don't talk about it because Nembhard has been a rock of stability for the Pacers for the better part of the postseason. But Andrew Nembhard has very quietly gone quiet. Can't have it. And Aaron Nesmith, who admitted that his ankle, maybe that reality was starting to kick in a little bit on the ankle, looked like it last night. Played just 16 minutes. They did get, I thought, decent contribution, and the contribution between Shepard and Walker. You're going to need that.
I thought Walker was fantastic last night.
He did play well. Coming in, we've been talking about it, right?
Yep. I thought he was really good on Brunson defensively. Like, it was a different body that Brunson hadn't
that's
gone
the
up
key,
against.
right?
Yeah.
But even when you're getting good defensive play on Brunson, Brunson still was the one controlling the game. He absolutely controlled the game. He controlled not just the pace of the game, but he controlled the mood of the game. Every time it got within, 9 to 12, boom, run, right? That's what was frustrating, was there were multiple occasions where you felt like, here we go, let's go, and then they just got pushed back a little bit, and New York would go on a run. They come back now, Game 6, you have to get it. And what the Pacers did last night, or rather what New York did, was they completely shifted the pressure now. Yes, of course, New York is the one with their back against the wall, but to an extent, Indiana is as well. Because you just cannot go back and I actually think they would win a Game 7, Indiana would, in New York. But nonetheless, it was a frustrating game. Is Tyrese Halliburton a superstar? He is. But he is a superstar because we're talking about whether or not he's a superstar. He's a superstar because he's a talking point in the NBA and to some extent a lightning rod because people are either all in or all out on him. You find very few people that say He's okay. He's okay. They have very strong opinion one way or the other. But the fact that he is eliciting conversation, that he is a focal point of conversation, of debate, of discussion, means that he's a star. The national shows aren't debating whether or not Ben Mathurin should be a starter. National shows aren't debating whether or not Miles Turner should be retained. They're debating whether or not Tyrese Halliburton is a superstar. And they're doing so because he is becoming a national name in basketball. That makes him a star. But to be a true leader champion, you have to do it night in and night out. And Halliburton, while he absolutely has it within him, the nights off are enigmatic and frustrating. And last night was a night off. It just was. He was not aggressive offensively. He, on far too many occasions, he bypassed opportunities to either drive or even like hit a pull-up shot. I know that they guarded him differently. I get that. But I think what Halliburton needs to figure out, and maybe it's situational, but when you have the ball in your hands and you are the guy that is trusted by your team in the max contract to be the one that lifts you to the promised land, then what that means is you are being entrusted and you have the ability to make the decision of whether or not you go for it or whether or not you facilitate others and which predicates the other. Eddie, when you think about Tyrese Halliburton, do you think about a guy that goes out and uses his vision, his Tetris mind that I talked about yesterday? Or do you think of him first as a guy that does that and then that opens things up where defenses sag off of him and then he gets offensively aggressive? Or do you think of him as a guy that immediately is offensively aggressive, defenses collapse on him, and then he uses his Tetris mind to develop everybody else?
Can I go with neither and open up a third door here?
Go ahead.
I think Tyrese's presence defensively opens up Tyrese's offensive game because when Jalen Brunson comes out and hits the first 3 shots of the game, it doesn't allow the Pacers to get into their flow offensively, and they just felt off kilter after the start because New York didn't allow Indiana to get out there and run. So when Tyrese and the rest of the team, for that matter, come out and they generate a couple early stops and it allows them to run, I think that gets Tyrese going a little bit offensively. And they just kind of struggled and they were just kind of lackadaisical, for a lack of a better word, I thought, last night, especially the starters. And then when the bench came in, they brought in a little energy. They cut the deficit down to, 4 points at the end of the first quarter, and then they were holding serve, and then they bring the starters back in the second. And, then, of course, they do it again at the end of the game when they get it down 10, and then it just
and
gets
you felt
pushed
pretty
right
good
back up
about
to
all
20.
that, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, when they got it down to 4 or when it was at 6 at the half, I think, you felt pretty good.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that we saw last night, this team has been able, we've seen it, obviously, I don't have to go back and remind everybody in this town knows about it. The number of games where they have snatched victory from the jaws of defeat because of a late burst or an incredible run where everything fell their way and they end up winning in the end. Those moments have been wonderful. My fear has been that eventually those moments cause teams to kind of rest on their laurels and bank on that. And throughout the meat of the game, create a lack of sense of urgency because you just in your mind are thinking to yourself, yeah, but it's going to work out okay because it always does. And eventually that was going to catch up to you. And I guess for the Pacers, perhaps, bad news, good news here. Bad news is maybe they rested on that too much. Good news is if there was a game to learn that lesson, maybe that was it last night, and they have 2 more now that game, that slip-up game is behind them. And that was their wake-up call. That, look, guys, just because you get it down to 6 doesn't mean that everything's just going to fall your way. Just because you cut the lead to 12 with 7 minutes to go, you're resting on, yeah, but we're okay here. No, you got to go. You got to push. I didn't think last night they pushed it. They did not push offensively. They did not push defensively. They were out of kilter, out of sort, and they allowed New York, to your point, Eddie, to dictate the pace. They allowed New York to dictate the pace. And as a result, back here now, back here for Game 6. Good news, bad news. Bad news, series extends. If they trip up here and they go back to New York, bad news, they got to go to Game 7 in New York. Good news, won there last year in Game 7. Good news, up 3-1 in 95. I realize none of these guys were like probably even alive then. Went back to New York, won a Game 7. It can be done, okay? And then good news, perhaps, you're causing Oklahoma City to have to sit and wait. And does that mean rust settles in? I don't know that. But Oak City is a lot like Indiana.
It wouldn't have mattered had they won last night or they win Game 6 or Game 7. The final start on Thursday regardless. Well, so they're sitting no matter what.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, but I guess let me rephrase that. It's not that Oklahoma City, the rust is settling in. It's that if you are going extended games, you're going from game to game, and so you're staying in rhythm. I guess that's a better way of saying it. Because I thought, even though that didn't take, after there was some thought that because New York went further with, hey, maybe, the Pacers, there was going to be rust. Clearly that wasn't the case in Game 1. But either way, disappointing nonetheless. We'll talk about it. We'll air it out. We will work our way through it over the course of the show today. Eddie, I know obviously you were working last night producing the game. Anything of note happened for you over the evening?
Not really. Nothing of note, really. As you noted, I was pretty much working all night last night, so I didn't get to do much other than produce.
Now, you had a side hustle at one time, right?
Yes.
And your side hustle's no more, right? Because now you have all the side hustles
Next
with
week.
the Fever and the Pacer games, right?
Next week.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Do they know this?
Yeah.
So you did the honorable thing here?
I did.
That was more than 2 weeks ago you told me about this. Did you put in a 2 weeks notice and they twisted your arm for 3?
No, I told them I'd work the remainder of the days scheduled, so.
Look at you. You seem very sheepish about this.
Uh-huh.
Are you not wanting people to know that you're a quitter?
No, I'm not.
Okay. But you left on good terms, right?
I think so.
You haven't checked?
I'll ask my brother.
Your brother's working there as well?
Yeah, he just started.
Okay, fair enough. Are you worried about Game 6 back here?
In what regard?
Did last night give you... I think that when it comes to the Knicks were a higher seed coming in. They have, they knocked off Boston, who's very good. I realized Boston was hurt. But yet, there were a lot of people that thought that New York would win this series in, 5 or 6. Obviously, that's impossible. And it doesn't seem like the Knicks at any point kind of woke up and came out of their shell and flexed muscle to the point of controlling a game. And last night they controlled a game. Are you worried in any way, shape, or form that is some sort of a wake-up call that New York is now the real New York? And that this is not going to be an easy knockout?
Well, we knew it wasn't going to be an easy knockout, but I'm not overly concerned just yet. It depends on how that first quarter goes on Saturday. If they come out and they play the style of basketball that we've seen them play in the playoffs, then I'm not worried. But if they don't and they come out sluggish, then I have to start wondering, like I asked you after Game 4, or it was either Game 4 or Game 3, if the Pacers were tired. It was Game 3 because that was the game they lost. If they were starting to feel fatigued, if the wear-down effect was wearing down on them.
It is interesting because we thought that was going to be the case with New York, and it feels like almost it shifted a little bit, right?
Yeah, it certainly did. I mean, you would have thought they were the more fresh team last night, or the fresher team, I should say, last night, if you watched that game and none of the other games leading up to the series, especially when Indiana relies on trying to wear teams down. And New York, once again, got valuable minutes from its bench. Landry Shamet was a pest defensively last night.
He hit a 3 last night that reminded me of Derek Harper.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
It was the Condor effect, right? Drives me nuts. Drives me nuts. I thought, let's be real here, okay? Where was Siakam? What happened to Siakam?
Well, I thought out of the 5 starters, he was the best starter last night.
Maybe. But my point being, they all, I mean, again, Mathurin came in, Siakam, 5 for 13, okay? But typically, you see him, maybe it's because Siakam's game, I think, is very predicated on what Siakam does really well. if this makes sense, it's going to sound weird. Siakam is remarkable at playing a half-court game in a full-court style. So in other words, if they get out and run, Siakam does an outstanding job of getting behind the defense and then getting the ball on the low block and being able to make the decision whether or not he then puts it on the floor to allow for a half-court setup or making one quick move and either fade away or getting right to the basket and scoring. And so maybe because the Pacers were never able really to get it running last night, that aspect of it was taken away, and they couldn't get him the ball in those areas where he can go one-on-one like that. You know, maybe you credit New York there. But it just felt like it's been a while since we've had this, but that was a game going right away that you could just tell. You're like, man, this is just not, I mean, everything. And the Pacers have had games like this at home, right, where everything goes your way, and you can just tell. You're on cruise control. To be fair, it felt that way when the Pacers got up 20 here at home, and then New York came back and took that and stole that game away from them.
You know who I was really frustrated with last night? Just because it was a game where I felt like you needed somebody to step up, and I haven't seen him step up much this series. You already hit it, and Andrew Nembhard. He's like 6 of 26 his last 3 games, but I thought Miles Turner to start that game last night was bad.
Fair.
He had a handful of turnovers. He wasn't catching passes, and then committing silly fouls, like letting Cat get right to the goal.
Well,
and
listen.
Then if you're going to foul, at least make him feel it. Don't let him finish through the contact and score and
you're
give
not
him a
going to win.
three-point play.
If you are the Indiana Pacers, you're not going to win many games where Miles Turner gets you 5 points and 2 boards.
None.
They completely knew. What they did last night was they completely neutralized all of Indiana's major attack points, right?
Yep.
They took Halliburton out of the game. They took Turner out of the game. And then Nesmith, I'm going to give a little bit of a pass because of the ankle, but he obviously did not play well, but defensively is his main responsibility. Nembhard's the other one. I mean, Nembhard, I think Nembhard is a guy that gets most of his points when the offense kind of rotates over towards him and he just gets a look that no one anticipates he's going to get. And if he's not actively taking advantage of that or knowing when those moments are, then yes, defensively he brings you something. But again, there wasn't a lot that he did. I don't buy into the plus-minus stuff much. I don't really, I flunked algebra 7 times, so I don't really even understand it in totality. But his plus-minus, if you go with that, was the second worst on the team behind only Toppin, right?
Mm-hmm. If you look at, out of the 5 starters, all of them were minus 20 at least besides Pascal. He was minus 1. And they cut it down to whatever, was it 12 in the fourth quarter with the 5 of Shepherd, Pascal, Siakam.
Walker might have been out there,
Walker was out there. I'm trying to remember, I don't know if Thomas Bryant was out there and McConnell. I think it was that 5. And then Rick calls a timeout, and there's a whole lineup change. He brings out everyone that was on the floor, and then boom, it's ballooned right back to 20.
One of the things that Carlisle has done very, very well is Carlisle has, and at times maybe it's to an error, but Rick Carlisle has been very good at riding the matchup hot hand that is working for him and sticking with a rotation that's working. And at times, Eddie, maybe even for too long, but I thought last night probably for too short at periods, right?
Yeah.
But again, I think you go back to, and this is the danger. I think the danger a little bit is you go back to, in your mind, let's get these other guys on the floor because those are the guys that have been on the floor when lightning has struck in a bottle and we've stolen games. And it never happened last night. But I think they rested on that a little much. I think last night, frankly, it comes down to this. I think what it comes down to last night is the Indiana Pacers underestimated the tenacity of the New York Knicks. And they thought New York was going to go the way of Milwaukee or Cleveland and pack it in. And if that's the case, and maybe they thought that too because they went into a Game 7 last year and owned that team. But and I'm not saying they've done it in the series. I'm not saying that they're guilty of it as a whole philosophically, but last night they underestimated New York. They just did. We got pizzas to give away today, right?
Oh, yes. We do have a gift card.
It's a Friday. That means
that
it's our Deep Dish Friday giveaway. So Chicago's Pizza, we got a $30 gift card to give away. We will do that on the program. Jeremiah Johnson going to join us, as I mentioned. Kevin Bowen as well. Franciscan Health, good for the heart. Feel Good Friday. We'll get to that in the 2 o'clock hour. So a lot to unpack. When we come back, an unpopular opinion, an easy pile-on target, and I actually thought the subject matter of it was, in this case, in the right. I'll explain next. So last night after the Pacer game, and let me give a little background to this, okay? I remember years ago when I first had a microphone to go into locker rooms and interview players. And one of the things that I learned was that, and it's difficult to remember this at times, but to players, they play 82 games a year. They play a gabillion playoff games. And, you know, we as fans and as media get so tied up into the emotions of games, and players oftentimes just kind of go through it. And, yes, they know the stakes, but they are so used to having to turn around and rechannel their energy, their thought. They are so quick to have to turn the page that they psychologically just are able to do that very easily. And I think sometimes that frustrates fans, and it certainly frustrated me as a younger person in particular when I would cover games, because I'm like, wait a minute, like, do you not realize everything that's at stake here? But I always felt like when you have the credential, and I don't mean credentials, I mean when you are given the media access to go in and interview players, your job to a great extent is to ask the questions that fans are shouting at their television in an editorialized and watered-down variation, of course, and in a professional manner. Now, I want you, when I'm about to play what I'm about to play, to consider this, okay? Obviously, I know Greg Doyle. Obviously, I have had Greg Doyle on different radio programs and know him beyond just what I read in his writings. And I know of the polarization of Greg Doyle. And I know at times of the thirst for that polarization that Greg Doyle has. And I obviously am aware of the incident with Greg Doyle and Caitlin Clark, which I don't know that I ever addressed. It seems that the general public addressed that enough without me having to weigh in on that. Everyone knows what I'm talking about when Caitlin Clark was first introduced with the fever and Greg Doyle asked her a question that was, it probably crossed a line and was a little bit creepy. I know Greg well enough to know that I don't believe that that was his intention, but that lack of understanding of the fact that it crossed that line was something by which he had to professionally learn a lesson. I don't know whether he did or not. I've never had that discussion with him. I don't work for him nor sign his paycheck or work with him, so it's not necessarily my area to ask him that. But he was covering the game yesterday, and an exchange took place and yes, Greg's reputation or the precedent of the Caitlin Clark thing probably comes into play. But when it comes to this exchange, I want you to listen to this and block that out. Okay? As if this was a civil trial and they said, well, that's not admissible in court because it doesn't apply to this situation. And maybe it does. I don't know. But tell me if you think, I'll give you my own thought on this awkward nature and whether or not it crossed a line or not. This is yesterday after the game. Greg Doyle of the Indianapolis Star and Pascal Siakam of the Pacers, after Siakam had basically inferred that New York played harder than did Indiana in the game last night.
How is that possible?
What do you mean?
How is it possible to not fight hard enough in game?
What are you talking about? They played harder than us. It's okay. We played hard, but they played harder. What's your point? I don't get it.
My point is, you're saying you guys got outfought, and I'm saying
that happens in the game, though. That's basketball.
In game 5, we didn't play. You're saying
you're good. You're good, bro. You're looking for something. I know. But damn. No. But I'm telling you though. I told you. What else do you want me to tell you?
Well, what you tell me how? That's all I'm asking.
Well, what about you tell me? So go ahead. Who's this guy? What's your name, bro? Oh.
Okay. I think actually Greg Doyle asked a good question. If you really want to know the truth, what are 90% of fans saying after that game last night to their friends? How in the world did New York outplay them so hard? How in the world did New York limit Tyrese Halliburton the way that they did? How in the world did, Miles Turner go out and get 3 rebounds and 3 points or whatever it was? How did Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard only hit 3 shots between them? And how is it that New York, who had Karl Anthony Towns as a game-time decision, who is running around like that grocery cart, with the bum wheel, okay? How is Karl Anthony Towns beating them to the basket? That's what fans are asking. So when Pascal Siakam comes out and says, yeah, you know what, they played harder than we did, I think it is a fair, natural follow-up question to say, but how and why? How is that? How did you let them play harder than you? What was the mindset that allowed them? Why do you think they played harder than you did? I think that's a fair, natural follow-up question. And Pascal Siakam, frankly, and I think Indiana's going to come back and win Game 6. I don't know Pascal Siakam. Seems like a really nice guy, a non-attention craving star, and a fabulous basketball player. But in that particular moment, I thought Siakam seemed a little bit flippant about it. Dude, you didn't just get beat. You got beaten. There's a difference. Getting beat by a last-second shot, laying it all on the line, that's one thing. And I love this team. And I love their effort, and I love their unity. I love everything about this Pacers team. It might be my favorite Pacers team that I've watched. And I've watched a lot of them. But there is a frustration from fans last night of you have a chance to advance to the NBA Finals for the second time in franchise history. You have a chance to slay the Dragon in Madison Square Garden on their home court. Everything that was on the line, everything that was at stake. All Siakam had to say, because it's what fans want to know. What people want to know is it because you now learned that you got too complacent? Because you had 2 more cracks at the wheel? Or spins of the wheel, I guess you'd say? 2 more cracks at it? Is it because you became too reliant on stealing games at the end of the game and you felt like that was going to bail you out? Is it because you were thinking about Cleveland and what happened to them in Game 5 and assumed New York was going to undergo? What is the reason why you came out with a tone that opened the door for another team to play harder than you? That's all he's asking is, well, yeah, I understand that you're saying that, but why do you think that is? Why did that happen? And instead of Siakam saying, actually it probably comes down to this, or thinking about it or giving a thoughtful answer, say what you want about Giannis. Giannis gives pretty thoughtful answers, and he takes the time to stop and think about it for a second. And Siakam basically laughed at him. So, what are you good here? Well, what's your problem? What's your problem? Well, the problem is I have this credential, so I am asking for a group of people that would like to know that don't have the access that I have. And that is, can you explain how it is in a game when your team had to win in order to go to the NBA Finals? Yes, you get 2 more cracks. Yes, your back's not against the wall. But with all that was potentially there for you right there on the table, why did you not put both hands into the meal?
You good, bro?
I don't think it was yes, Greg Doyle has erred in the past and put himself in a position to be questioned or maybe lose benefit of the doubt in that situation. But in that situation last night, I think it was a fair question. And I think it was a little bit of an escape route from Siakam to deflect from the reality of the question. Mo, I'll get to you and the rest of you as well. 239-1070. Feel free to disagree with me. Jeremiah Johnson, top of the hour. So Pacers, it will be tomorrow night, game number 6 with the New York Knicks. By the way, the NCAA tournament, I guess we can talk about this at some point. They're talking about expanding again. This has been on the front burner for a while now.
Why?
Is there anybody that wants this?
No.
Is there anybody that's like, oh, man, they need to do what they can to make sure that 15 and 17 Virginia Tech gets in?
Got to make sure Drexel gets into the field somehow, right?
That's right. All right, Dave and Wes, I'll get to you, but Mo's been waiting patiently and joins us on the program. How are you, Mo?
Good. I'm really good, Jake.
Now, this is Mo from Northwest Ohio, right?
Yeah, it is. I'm calling you from Minneapolis, though. I got my son up here. He's moving here, but thought I'd listening to you up here. I had an observation about last night's game, and my thing was the fact that the dynamics of two type of teams. You have New York that basically centers around Jalen Brunson and then the Pacers who play that team ball and everything like that. And when things fail for New York, you can pretty much go to Brunson. But for the Pacers, it was that the Knicks had kind of taken away the break by making it hard for Halliburton to get the ball and get going. And then on top of that, Nimhart and Neesmith, two cogs in the wheel, for whatever reason, haven't been kind of contributing. And so it kind of became a little bit more evident to the Pacers in the loss.
Now, Mo, I thought what happened last night, to your point, and tell me if you agree with this, and you've coached basketball, so you know the game a little bit, right? I thought New York picked up Halliburton defensively much further out than they had previously. And by doing that, you're kind of cutting off the head of the snake early, and then that ground everything to a halt in terms of Indiana's motion because Halliburton is the guy, he's the piston that's firing everything else, and you've neutralized him.
Yep, I agree with that 100%, and that's what I thought had happened. My only thing is I didn't understand, and athletes are athletes. There's reasons why, but I just couldn't understand why Halliburton didn't take more than 7 shots when the things were needed at times. But and the thing, the dynamics of the whole thing, Pacers have been living off of the bench has been picking up for the starters and stuff, but the starters right now, for whatever reason, whether it be injury or just having that type of time, we're not getting some things done, and then it just kind of was a snowball down a hill.
They certainly were not last night. Now, we'll see if home court changes that. Before we get to Dave and West, Mo, I want to point this out. Okay, I don't know if I've mentioned this on the air or not. But I need a Mo from Northwest Ohio, diehard Colts fan, now in the Colts fan Wall of Fame. I need your confession on this, okay? For those that are unfamiliar, and I don't even remember the circumstances, how it came to be, but there was a game this year where Shannon could not attend. I asked if you wanted to come down to the game. You came to the game. The Pacers were playing the Bucks. On the way there, you mentioned to me that you grew up a Bucks fan because you liked Alcindor and the Big O. And then that was the game where Halliburton had the 4-point play that won the game, and you were sitting right in the hornet's nest of Pacers fans going crazy. And to your credit, you showed no emotion. You were absolutely stoic. It was incredible. It was impressive, and you got out of there safe. But I want to know if deep down that was killing you inside.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, sure enough. It's just a fan.
Listen,
fan, always a fan. But I as a coach, look at the Pacers, and I had this talk with my son last night. They are, if you hate the NBA because it's an individual game and it's all the bells and whistles and the team thing's gone, you are missing it by not watching the Pacers. I enjoy watching the Pacers.
Well, I appreciate it, Mo. And, listen, Halliburton hit that shot and beat your team, and that was after you had to sit and endure 2.5 hours next to me. So, I mean, that was a double whammy for sure, but you handled it like a champ. And I like what you said about the Pacers from the team aspect. As for the situation last night with Greg Doyle and Pascal Siakam, Dave weighs in and joins us. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Guy. Hey, thanks for taking my call. Hey, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you because, and you would know this from sports, you would know this from your job. There are times that things that you just have a bad day. I'm actually kind of surprised at how well these athletes who are wired way different than the normal human being are able to handle these questions. Now, when did he give this inside detailed report? No. He didn't talk about how New York kind of clogged things up. See, I think the big thing about the game last night was, if you look at the stats from the previous games, we've outscored the Knicks by a ton on fast breaks, and especially live ball turnover fast breaks, and they just clogged the game up. And,
okay, so let me ask you this, Dave. Are you married?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you ever ask your wife if she had or your spouse if they had a good or bad day?
Do I ever ask them if they have a bad? I've been married 41 years. I don't have to ask.
Well, okay. Well, good point. But my point being, if you say like, "Hey, how's it going?" or anybody, any coworker, "Hey, what's going on?" They go, "Man, I'm having a bad day." Do you leave it at that, or do you say, "Well, so what's going on? Why are you having a bad day?"
Well, it would depend obviously on the relationship, and I thought your point was good by the fact that Mr. Doyle represents individuals who don't have it. But in my opinion, because I have a sports background, I played, I coached, and so on and so forth, there are times, especially in it's really kind of a short period of time from the time that gentleman stepped, Mr. Siakam, or any of the players, anybody, Giannis, Brunson, anybody.
I get it. I mean, I get it. The emotions are high. I get it. The thing is, Dave, and I'm not trying to cut you off. I got to get to Wes as well, and I appreciate it. My point simply being that Siakam kind of laughed it off. He didn't just say like, "Man, I wish I could give you a better answer," but they just played harder than we did. That happens in sports. It was the fact that he was flippant about it. Like, "What do you want me to say, man? Like, so what? Like, we got beat. They played better than we did." Greg's job is to write a column about why New York played better than they did. So he's asking Pascal Siakam, give me your. I'm doing a survey. Give me your opinion. Why did they play better than you did? Well, they just did. Okay. I just thought it was an unsatisfactory answer from Siakam. Wes is up next. Hey, Wes, what's up?
Hey, thanks, Jake. First off, I just want to say that I'm a very casual race fan, and I learned a lot during the month of May listening to your show. Learned a lot about IndyCar and became a bigger fan, so I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I mean, I want to make sure that I'm doing it within the scope of not speaking to a limited audience, and you know what I mean? And so I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, you absolutely did. So I'm also calling in on what Doyle said to Pascal last night, and you kind of answered a little bit of what I was going to talk about. But I think the calling card of the Pacers are they outwork people, right? Like they don't out-talent people. So I think like Pascal, from my point of view, this is kind of how I took it, is Pascal kind of felt that he kind of they basically called him out for not doing. They out hustle people, they outwork people, 9 times out of 10, and that's their calling card. And then Doyle kind of questions that, and I think that's kind of why he felt offended. Maybe
I don't think Doyle questioned it. Siakam did. Siakam's the one that said it. Siakam's the one that said we were out hustled, we were outplayed. So Doyle then responded with, "But that's been your calling card. So how did that happen? What did they do?"
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's fair, and like you said in the last when Dave, you just talked to Dave, and you talked about the emotions involved and stuff, and that's not that's your calling card. I guess that's not easy to answer for, but I don't know. I guess my question would be this, Wes: if it was anybody but Doyle, because I understand Doyle's a lightning rod, I get it, and I understand that Doyle has worn out a lot of people in this town. If it was anybody other than Doyle, would you have sided with Siakam? If that was John Smith from the Kokomo Tribune, who you'd never heard of before, would you have the same I don't mean you, Wes, but just fans in general, would they have the same reaction? That's my question. Andrew and Keith, I'll get to you, and JJ as well on the other side.
1 o'clock hour underway in Indianapolis. For that matter, the 1 o'clock hour is underway everywhere in the Eastern time zone. Good afternoon to you. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, the other voice you hear in this program. It is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Jeremiah Johnson, FanDuel Sports Network and Pacers Television, going to join us in just a second. But Andrew's been waiting patiently, and I wanted to get to him. Andrew, how are you?
Hey, how are you today?
I can't complain. Yourself?
There's no way. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a realist. But there's no way the NBA is going to let New York go down and have two small markets duke it out when there's hundreds of millions of dollars out there. They're not going to leave that on the table. There's no way that the NBA is going to let New York go down.
Andrew, quick question for you. What team would you say in the last 30 years has been the largest or the most consistent dynasty in the NBA?
Probably LA.
Which ones won like multiple championships with multiple number one draft picks that they got in the lottery, even when they were like not expected to win the draft lottery? Getting guys like Tim Duncan and Wembanyama, winning multiple titles. What's that?
San Antonio.
Okay. What was there a conspiracy to make sure that Television Market 56 was winning multiple championships year in and year out and beating the likes of LA on the way to get there, and Miami and places like that?
Well, San Antonio had Tim Duncan,
Right.
the Admiral.
Right.
They had superstars. We don't have a superstar.
They had those superstars because they somehow won the draft lottery, despite now Robinson not the case, but in Duncan and Wembanyama's case. Okay, so then what about? Let me ask you this: who won the title a couple years ago when a guy had 50 in Game 7 or Game 6 or whatever it was in the title, just north of us? A Greek guy. Named Giannis. Who's he play for?
Milwaukee.
Okay. Was there a conspiracy that year to make sure that Television Market 41 won the NBA title?
Well, that's an exception and not the rule.
The Knicks are arguably the most futile franchise in the NBA. They haven't won a title in over 50 years. They haven't. Matter of fact, I'm not sure they've won a title in my lifetime. So, is the conspiracy just this year, or did the NBA finally decide to help starting them? Letting them start to win.
I think with New York, it'd be more like a David versus Goliath. But if you have two small markets in there, I think in the East and the West Coast they're not going to tune in.
Okay. We'll see. I don't disagree that Indiana and Oklahoma City would be interesting from a television market standpoint, but the theory that the NBA is rigged to benefit the New York Knicks, they have an interesting way of paying that off. Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that segue, on the Ryan Geist Brewery guest line, Jeremiah Johnson from the FanDuel Sports Network. Did I say that right, JJ? FanDuel Sports Network and Pacers Television. Is that right?
You're correct.
Okay, good.
I'm excited for this interview based on the last 15 minutes of your show. I didn't hear you off the top, so I'm not sure of all of your takes, but the last 15 minutes has me fired up.
Okay, tell me what you're fired up about.
A little facetious. Well, the last comment, I probably understand fans' frustration and thinking maybe there are some other things going on. But I'm going to say right now that there is nothing WWE-like about the NBA playoffs. And you've seen this postseason, the unpredictability. And I don't think if somehow the Knicks do win this series, I don't think it'll be because the NBA made it happen.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's the first part. Let's get that one out of the way.
Okay.
But I respect fans' passion, and I was that fan at one point, and I will say I had some of those same thoughts with the Larry Johnson 4-point play. But those are it's a different time right now, and I don't think anything is at play.
Fair enough. Okay. Other reasons you're fired up?
Well, I think sometimes the wording in a post-game press conference can then lead to reactions and discussions and frustration that doesn't necessarily match what really happened. So, I don't have word for word what Pascal Siakam said in the post-game press conference, but when you say things like they tried harder, then it's a trigger for the fans. And I think it's false to say the Pacers didn't try. Now, there are two teams playing that game. Only one can play harder than the other. It's impossible for them to play, the same level of, quote unquote hard. But really the words Rick Carlisle used about force and physicality Those are probably better words, and those are maybe more accurate in terms of what really happened in the game. And again, the Knicks, we have seen, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's the Major League Baseball playoffs, it's a football game between the team that has a spot clinched and another one that is faced with, win or go home. Sometimes the desperate team, and it's the margins are so small. I mean, it could be, if 100% is the absolute hardest and best you can play, it could be 100% to 99%. But that 1% can be a big difference. And so it's not like the Pacers went into that game and just decided, well, we're not going to try hard. I mean, some of it is you can't just run the way the Pacers run.
But my point is that, Jeremiah, here's my point, though. Here's my point. I don't disagree with any of that, right? And I want to make clear here, I don't think Siakam nor Doyle was at fault. I mean, I think it's basically like a tie, right? But what I'm getting at is Doyle did not say, hey, those guys played harder than you tonight. Why is that? He was reacting to a comment that was made of, well, you said those guys played harder than you. Why is that? So he's just asking for an elaboration on a comment that was already made. To me, that's fair game.
And I also am not coming on here saying one person was right and
no,
one person
I get
was
that.
wrong. I'm speaking more to the general. I've already been out and about, had lunch today, talked to my son, and there's this common feeling out there, and not everyone even heard that exchange, where they just felt like they didn't play as hard as the Knicks. And I would say they didn't match the Knicks' physicality. They didn't play the way they played, let's say, in Game 4. But there are some reasons for that, and it's nothing to do with, we make this decision, we're not going to.
So he's asking the reasons. That's my point. Isn't it fair to ask the reasons?
Well, I would say the reasons are, when you say the Pacers are playing hard, they're playing fast. And you can't play fast if the Knicks never miss any shots, and you can't get those fast break opportunities. If you don't force the turnovers and they force your turnovers, then what you see on the court is just not as fast-paced of a game.
Okay, so what I'm getting at, Jeremiah, and it sounds like I'm arguing with you. I'm not. I mean, I'm just making the point. And I get it. It's different because you're coming off of the emotion right off the game in those press conferences, right? But my point being that what you just gave is an excellent explanation. So why was it so hard for Siakam to give that explanation as opposed to just laughing at it and saying, I don't know, bro, you good?
That I don't know. I'm not in public relations or, I've not been that kind of a player and an athlete at that level to be faced with a room full of 30 people wanting an answer of why you lost the game, when sometimes the answer is the Knicks were better than us, but no one wants, that for an answer. And I totally get it. I mean, I get to interview players after wins on the court. We don't have to do the walk-off interview after a loss. Now, it's not like I've never interviewed players after losses, but when there is a loss, everyone wants an answer, and, credit those who have to ask those questions all of the time. Sometimes there are no good answers except, to me, to tip your cap to the opponent. And I went into this series thinking it was going to be a little bit of a toss-up series. One team won 50 games. One team won 51. One team was 13th in defensive rating. One team was 14th in defensive rating. If injuries were not a factor, I thought it's a 6 or a 7-game series that could go either way. So as much as I've watched sports, I'm not surprised that we're at Game 6. And if you're a Pacers fan, you're up 3-2. So again, that's the glass half full approach to what you saw. But I'm a little the overreaction and the blanket statements from everyone after one loss in a series like that is a little bit tough.
And again, and this will be my final point on it, I don't disagree with that. The blanket statement did not come from the press; it came from the player. That's my point. But what do you think New York did do differently?
That had nothing to do with the final score. That's like semantics after the fact, and we're probably spending too much time on that and not actually what happened in the game if we're going to have a day after analysis.
Right, which is why I was going to ask. So what do you think they did differently, in particular with Halliburton, that limited – because Halliburton does, I think – there's a great extent of he's the piston that's firing the Pacers' fluidity mostly, right? And so what adjustments do you think New York did to limit Halliburton, which then as a result slowed the pace of Indiana?
Well, it looked like starting off the game, Bridges was, blanketing him all over the court. And not that this is a new strategy for defenses, but you could tell from the first or second possession – when the Knicks made a shot, who did they inbound the ball to?
When the Knicks Say that
No,
again.
when the Knicks made a shot, the Pacers, who did they inbound the ball to after the Knicks made a shot?
Well, typically the ball was inbounded to Halliburton, right?
When I saw early, it was a lot to Nembhard. And so you're
okay.
starting the game with Halliburton playing off the ball. And it seems like a lot of times when the Pacers have been successful, again, it's after a miss,
because
then Halliburton gets the ball.
And then he's streaking, right? I mean, Halliburton's getting it. Here's what I said, Jeremiah, and my apologies there. I misunderstood. And you tell me if you agree with this. I made this analogy yesterday. Halliburton has this remarkable ability to get the ball like along like the side baseline, let's say. And when he gets it, he has this ability to then forecast in his mind whether he immediately accelerates with deep pass down, often to Siakam on the block before the defense is getting down there, and Siakam's allowed to isolate and score in a quick basket, right? A quick 4 to 8 second basket. Or Halliburton then makes a decision to then go down and set up their half-court set of that motion that allows for, in particular, an outside shot that gets open. And so, yes, you are correct. I thought yesterday, though, what happened was they were just picking up Halliburton so early that he could not get that first immediate entrance pass down court to accelerate their offensive set.
Yeah, I think that it's not a new strategy, but that it's easier to do when you make a shot. And if you watch Mikal Bridges, I don't think he's going after offensive rebounds. When that shot goes up, he's almost looking for Tyrese Halliburton just to make sure that he cannot let Halliburton get the ball. And so then it's incumbent to me on Nembhard to be Tyrese Halliburton, at least to start that possession. When it's McConnell in the game, you know he's going to go fast, but it's a little bit of a different style. And when the Pacers get a steal, then all bets are off, right? Because then no one's in position to immediately pick up Halliburton. Then he's able to go. Then the Pacers get their run-out opportunities. I mean, the Pacers' success it's incumbent upon them to play fast. And again, to get that offense started with, let's say, 18 or 17 on the shot clock and not take a long time to get the ball at the court, it's not a lot different than what the Pacers are trying to do to Brunson. I mean, they're trying to keep him from getting the inbounds pass. That's why you saw a lot of this series, Josh Hart being the one, to bring the ball up the court. If you can deny Brunson a chance to even get it until there's 15 on the shot clock, then, they're that much later in their execution. And I mean, you watch a lot of the games, Jake. You sit right there. When the Pacers are shooting with 5 or less on the shot clock, they're not a team with a lot of ISO players. I mean, that's probably the best situation for Benedict Mathurin, and it's probably the reason he had so many opportunities is they were executing late in the shot clock. They want to execute early in the shot clock, and the Knicks are preventing them from that. Now you could say, well, how is it happening? Again, the Knicks are trying to take away what the Pacers do best. So how do the Pacers counter? It'll be the biggest thing I'm watching. Can they pick that pace up? Can they get Halliburton running and going, get the ball in his hands earlier in an offensive possession in Game 6?
What do you think they do for that? I mean, what do they do to jumpstart that?
Yeah, sometimes they've been setting, higher screens to get him free. Maybe you set a screen for Halliburton at, 80 feet from the basket instead of just across half court. Maybe you've got a double screen. I think they do know that good things happen when the ball is in Tyrese Halliburton's hands. He can play off the ball. He can have that Steph Curry role. I heard some of the national analysts talking after Game 5. It was easy to throw out, or Game 4, I should say, lofty comparisons in that, Steph Curry is the Warriors point guard, but he doesn't always bring the ball up the floor, and his shooting ability, he can run off screens. But the Pacers are at their best when he starts the possession. But again, some teams just say, we're not going to allow that to happen. And so it's got to happen through screens. And then it also, if Nembhard makes teams pay by overplaying Halliburton and he's able to play fast, let's say he just takes it and goes and gets that offense going, that's how you beat it as well.
Jeremiah Johnson, our guest, he's on the Rhinegeist Brewery guest line talking about the Pacers and Knicks Game 6 tomorrow night at the Fieldhouse. JJ, there are a couple of guys that have gotten minutes in this series situationally or just in terms of matchups. I mean, Tony Bradley comes to mind, kind of prioritizing over Thomas Bryant. I think a lot of that has to do with the size of Mitchell Robinson. We saw Jarris Walker, who Eddie and I have talked about for the last couple of games, I thought give them some pretty good minutes last night. Was that strictly just trying to get something jump-started, or are we perhaps seeing a re-entry of Walker back into the rotation?
It'll just depend on how Game 6 goes. Again, this is just me as someone that was sitting on the couch last night watching, that when it wasn't going well for Aaron Nesmith. Whether the ankle was bothering him or not, I can't, necessarily say, but it did open the door to an opportunity to a guy like Jarris Walker to get some minutes. And if there's one positive takeaway maybe from Game 5, that he kind of shakes the rust off a little bit, gets a little bit of confidence. So if his number's called in Game 6, you have that much more confidence in him. What he brings in terms of physicality defensively probably is his biggest benefit. And so that is needed against the Knicks, right? I mean, Aaron Nesmith is so valuable because of him being really the only guy that has had a fair amount of success in trying to take away what Jalen Brunson does. It's been a matchup the Pacers have went to try to slow Brunson down. Maybe you're finding, is Walker another guy that can at least get you a 2 or 3 minute stretch to make life difficult for Brunson? I'm not sure, but I think circumstances allowed him the opportunity, and then his play could give him a bigger role. But I don't know that you'd go into Game 6 saying he's going to be the X factor. I think he's going to be a factor, but we'll see what kind of a role happens.
Jeremiah Johnson, our guest. Jeremiah, obviously, over the course of the year, you're with this team 82 games, plus the postseason, right? First 2 rounds, I guess, right? Or just first round?
First round,
yeah.
Yep.
And so, you see this team for close to 90 games a year. I think that we as fans, media, non-people that are around the team that intimately, expect that fans have the same level of emotion of highs and lows from one game to the next that we do. And yet, for teams, back to your original point, it's a game and it's a job. And you kind of, you have good days at work, you have bad days at work. And the next day you go back to work and you kind of forget about the bad day the day before. What is it about this team, if anything, that you have noticed, or can you give glimpse for the listeners here, both of them, what the mindset is of this particular group in times when things aren't going well, and whether or not you have been able to, on the plane, in the airport, on the bus, see tension with this group?
I'm not sure that tension would necessarily be the way I would describe it, but there's a great amount of resolve, and the numbers, would back this up. They have not lost 2 straight games since March 10th, and when they have been faced with adversity, or when they've had a game that was really disappointing, they have a great amount of pride and a lot of personal. I don't know that they're going to spend the whole bus ride scrolling through their mentions, but I think they're aware of what is said about them. Look no further than the way that, Tyrese Halliburton has reacted to the Athletic poll, and even as minor as it really ended up being, as you peel it back, maybe 13 players said he was overrated. He has used that as motivation. When they've not played well, they want to get out there, and they don't want 2 days off. They want to get back out on the court as quickly as they can and make amends. And look at what you saw between Game 3 and Game 4. It's in a playoff series, or really any high-profile situation. When you play well, you think you're invincible on the outside, and you think you can never lose. And then when you lose or play poorly, and I'll say it, they played poorly. They would probably acknowledge that last night. You think you can never win again. Well, this team has done a really good job of, in those moments when they have a bad game, it's not necessarily they're out running wind sprints or having this knockdown, drag-out practice. The film sessions are really important. They do a good job of, putting together clips showing this is where we made mistakes. Also, in that game where you think nothing went right, these are the things that we did right, and then they build on that. So the bounce back ability of this team has been really good. Now, I wasn't sure which direction you'd go with the question. They've also struggled at times in this, let's say, 2 to 3 year run dealing with prosperity. I think they've done better with that maybe in the second half of this season, but it's something Jenny Busic's brought up to me a couple of times in the middle of games where, coming off a really big win against a lesser opponent, they get off to a bad start, and it's dealing with the highs. And so you could not have had a bigger high than you had in Game 4, team-wise or individual-wise. And perhaps it's a little bit of, reading the press clippings, if you will, or just relaxing just a little bit. And sometimes it leads to just not your best performance. And I think that's what we saw in Game 5. But if history is any indication, the resiliency that they have and they've shown will show in Game 6.
I was a little bit, Jeremiah, disappointed is the wrong word here, but I don't know the word I'm looking for, but with Siakam, back to the original point, when Siakam after the game was asked about the intensity of the Pacers and seemed to dismiss it, okay? My initial reaction was of frustration. That's probably a better way of saying it. Of frustration because I saw last night how intense fans were and worried about that effort. And for him to kind of laugh and be like, look, it is what it is, and be matter of fact about it was frustrating to me. But then, and I want you to tell me if there's an element of truth to this, then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, as the veteran that was brought in who has a ring and has been through the rigors of winning a championship, maybe that's a leadership by example because he's indirectly telling his teammates that it's not time to panic and that everything is going to be okay and that's not lighthearted, but it's rather perspective, and that's what they need because that's who they turn to. Any truth to that possibly?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the kind of game in a series like this that you don't want to forget, but you can't dwell on. You can't, if you're a player faced with an opportunity, and that's what this is right now. This is an opportunity to win one game at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, to go to the NBA Finals for the first time since 2000. If Pascal Siakam goes to that podium and hangs his head and just completely, trashes his teammates and, has this feeling that the world has come to an end, that's not a good look. And I thought it was, the one exchange is what gets a lot of the attention. The last thing that he said is really the way this team feels and the approach that they have. And feel free to, I don't know if Eddie can find it or play it at some point, but I reposted it from actually our pregame producer, Ken Soff, and sent it from ESPN. But it starts with him saying it's us against the world. And that's sort of the feeling they have. Everyone's going to count them out. No one, he says, wanted them to be there anyway. Well, here they are. And again, I thought that message that he had as he said those words, and then he walked away from the podium, is the message that probably should get a little more time spent. So, I think that the initial words to our original, back and forth here, it can be taken a little bit, to the extreme level if you say you didn't play hard enough. But what else is there to say? If the follow-up is, why didn't you? I don't know. It didn't happen. But how many times, and I was just going through looking at different NBA finals, teams rarely win 4-0. They rarely win 4-1. Teams that have been some of the best in the world have had off nights, and the Thunder lost by 45 in Game 3 against the Timberwolves. So it happens. It's how you respond, and I can't wait to see how they respond.
Yeah, it'll be fun for certain. And I guess, here's the thing. It's not just the Pacers against the world, Jeremiah, first and foremost. As we heard just before you came on, it's the Pacers against the NBA because they insist on New York being there since Oklahoma City's already punched their ticket and they can't have two small market teams in, right?
Yeah. The other thing I'll say about that, the NBA has already signed the contracts for the national TV deals for the next however many years, and they got a really good deal. Those numbers aren't going to change. The money coming in is already guaranteed no matter what the ratings are. So nothing annoys me more than the national narrative of, oh, no one wants to watch this. If you like basketball, it could be a really entertaining series between two teams that play a fast-paced brand of basketball. But you can't put the cart before the horse. You can't think about that right now. You only control what you can. And so if the Pacers get there.
The league better have some meetings going on, Jeremiah, because Oklahoma City's going nowhere anytime soon, right?
Yeah, if they have a problem with Oklahoma City being good, they're going to have to really do some work behind the scenes.
Yeah, I would say that is a fair statement. By the way, is Oklahoma City cool? I mean, the city itself. You've obviously been there for games. Is it 1995 Indianapolis?
That's a good question. I will say yes, it's cool. It's not like many of the other cities. So you can be walking around at times, and again, this is no disrespect to Fort Wayne. I love Fort Wayne, but you kind of feel like parts of it, you're just walking around there. And then they have a cool little Bricktown area where there's, bars and restaurants and a minor league baseball field. So I like the weather. They have a little river walk as well. So it's got, small San Antonio feel to it. But it's definitely different than most of the cities that you go to. And I don't know necessarily that I can have this picture of Indianapolis in 1995, but it is a smaller NBA city.
Okay, I've asked you this before, I think, but obviously, if I were to ask you on the NBA circuit, best city, if you've got a day layover, LA and New York are pretty hard to beat, right? Miami's pretty tough to beat. The one that people would be surprised by, the most underrated city in the NBA in terms of, yeah, you know what? Like it's friendly, it's pretty clean, it's easy to get around, there's stuff to do. I kind of like it. Go.
Well, the last part, easy to get around. I don't traditionally explore quite like you do on your IndyCar road trips. It's a lot of walking, but I like downtown Denver, and a lot of that depends on the time of the year. We've been there at times when it's frigid and freezing cold, and once you make that long jaunt from the airport to downtown, I really like the vibe downtown and just everything about it. I mean, it seems like it's never ending. There's another street with something going on and something to do, and I've seen the streets blocked off at different times. So I really like Denver. Dallas is a pretty cool little city as well, especially the Midtown area. I get asked some of these questions a lot, and sometimes I give different answers depending upon the most recent experiences. So, but Oklahoma City is unique and interesting, and I would say that if anyone was to go and spend 4 or 5 days there with the NBA Finals going on, you'd have a great time.
Okay, most lame.
See, this is kind of like asking the NBA player the most overrated. Like someone's going to have their feelings hurt.
Okay, how about this then?
I don't necessarily mind. I don't have a big enough voice that it's going to.
Well, okay. How about the one that most people just, it's a fine city, but surprisingly not as much to do in it as one would assume.
Okay. Philadelphia is one that I've not particularly enjoyed.
Fair.
But again,
I
know there's a lot to do, and I think it's, again, a place that's better in the summer than in the wintertime. And then part of it is I'm a little jaded, too, when we're in these cities, the time spent in the arena, that arena that the Sixers play in, probably one of, I'd put it between 25th and 30th on the list. It's not held up well, in my opinion. So I don't maybe enjoy the visits there as much as some of the others.
I mean, Detroit is kind of in that same category, right? Like older, proud, historic city, but yet at the same time, strangely, like St. Louis, not a lot in the downtown quadrant, right?
They actually have increased and picked that up a little bit. And again, when you think of that area where you've got Ford Field, you've got the Tiger Stadium, you've got Little Caesars Arena, and you've got some casinos.
Pizza.
I mean, there are things that you can do. So I know that we may be within shouting distance of people from Michigan, and JMV does enough discussion about pure Michigan. So I'll avoid making anybody mad from Detroit.
I'm going to be in Detroit in like 8 hours, so I probably shouldn't make anybody upset up there either. But for what it's worth.
And you can always go to Windsor like we did when we were 19 years old.
I'm going to Windsor. Do you want a bag of ketchup potato chips? Because I'm going just to get ketchup potato chips. I may get stopped at the border and not allowed back in, but that's okay. I'm going to have $200 worth of ketchup potato chips with me. So if you want some, you let me know. I will not be there for Game 6, Jeremiah. So if you if you're in your normal seats, I know you haven't been there the last couple of games, but I won't be there, and Shannon's not going to be there either. So if you're going to be there, yell loud enough for 3 people. All right?
I haven't quite determined. I'll probably be standing in a concourse somewhere, and probably will try to, at least if I have a tie on, be somewhat professional. I had a ball cap and T-shirt on last game and was cheering pretty loudly, but we'll see what happens. And I know that there'll be a lot of people there. You just hope that they're all wearing their gold shirts.
They got them. It's gold out. Eddie's got it. All right, JJ, appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
All right, Jake. Safe travels to Michigan.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Jeremiah Johnson joining us on the Rheingeist Brewery guest line. Did you just send it to me? It's a gold out again, right?
Yes. No yes sirs on it. So I'm sure you and JMV are happy about that.
Yeah. This is a good looking one. It's just the logo, right? It's just the logo. 2025 Eastern Conference Finals. Does that mean they've run out of sayings? It's a good looking shirt, actually. Now, I did notice.
I like how you're not going and they give out a shirt that you like.
Yeah.
By the way, Jake, you're in Detroit, so you're going up to Canada. What's going on with Boo?
Eddie.
Throwing a party?
Listen, I've got a predicament here.
Okay.
I've got a real predicament.
Okay.
This has to be the first time in the history of sports talk radio that a sports radio host has ever announced this sort of a predicament.
Okay.
But as people know, I have a cat, right? I'm a cat dad.
Yeah.
It's just me and the cat. That's all that lives where I live, just me and Boo.
In your watches, in your cologne. Yep.
And I leave. Should I announce like that? Yeah, I mean, nobody can get in where I live. What the heck? So I'm going to be gone for the IndyCar race in Detroit, and I leave today at like 4 p.m. I'll get back Sunday night at like 9 p.m. So this is 52 hours by himself for the cat. Now, Shannon out of town, my sister out of town, Valerie, who's been a great cat sitter for me, out of town. So now I'm worried. And I don't know. I'm asking legitimately, out of legitimate concern. I mean, he is my dude. Like, he is a cool cat. He is the best.
I know you're talking about me here, too.
52 hours by himself. Now, he's got an automatic cat feeder. He's got 2 litter boxes, including one that's an auto cleaner, and 3 bowls of water. But I'd like for someone to pop in and give him just a few pets and companionship so he can hear a human voice.
You know, Jake, I am an animal dad myself. I've got 2 dogs, Joey and Yogi. We've got a cat named Child. I'm more than willing to step up to the plate here and take over and show Boo what a real parent is like.
Okay, so first off, is a cat okay by themselves for 2 days?
Oh, absolutely.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know though. He's very regimented. He follows me. He's very regimented. He's very attached to me.
Mm.
He'll probably hide if you come over, but do you want to do some cat sitting?
I can do that, yeah, sure. You know, he probably stays attached to you because he understands that you miss being around this awesomeness right here, or your other best friend, Derek. Like, and he just senses that you're feeling lonely and depressed when you're not around either one of us.
Derek, this is how you know that Boo's close to me. Derek, one time I did have Derek Schultz pop in when I was out of town, and Boo hid the whole time. Never saw him. So he's well trained in that regard.
It was probably his whiskers.
What's that?
It was probably Derek's
That's right.
whiskers.
That's right. Is the NCAA tournament expanding? We're going to discuss that, and we'll get back to Pacers next. I need someone to explain to me like I'm a fifth grader, which is essentially what I am. I need someone to explain to me like I'm a fifth grader why or what the benefit is of the NCAA tournament expanding.
More games, more dollars, Jake. That's all it comes down to.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember. I do not really recall when the tournament was 32 teams and when it went to 48. I vividly recall when it was 48 teams and then expanded to 64. As a matter of fact, you know, the 48-team draw, back then you would get a bye.
So it went from 16 teams.
Let me guess the years here. Tell me the increment that it moved up, and I'll tell you what year that happened.
So it grew to 16 teams first.
Okay. That was in 1939.
1951 is when it expanded to 16.
Oh, when it expanded to 16. Okay, because the first year of the tournament was 39. Okay, so, okay.
And then it doubled to 32.
Okay, I'm going to guess that was in If I had to guess for that, I would say 1970.
When were you born?
72.
So you would have been, no, it was 75.
Okay.
And then it expanded to its current size of 64 teams.
Well, it went to 48 at some point. For sure, it went from 32 to 48. I don't know what you're looking at, but I'm telling you right now.
NCAA.com, I think, is pretty reliable.
I'm telling you, it was a 48-team field at one point. It went from 32 to 48 to 64. I will bet $1,000 on this.
Well, you can give me $1,000 because I am on NCAA.com.
Okay, well, I'm telling you, it was then there's an error on their website. Crazy as that sounds, it was I will undeniably, without question, say it was a 48-team field. But when they expanded to 64, they went from 48 to 64. I remember in 81, Indiana, a lot of people forget this, but in 1981 when Indiana won the tournament, one of their big coups was, DePaul had gotten a bye, and so Indiana was playing their first 2 rounds in Assembly Hall. DePaul got a bye, but then they got upset by St. Joseph's, and DePaul was the number 1 seed in the region. That was a huge win for Indiana. But nonetheless, when they went to 68 and you had the play-in games, even that I think was, there were people that were like kind of a yawn about it. But the play-in games have kind of become fun. It's become fun in Dayton with, just having that tradition, if you will, of those teams. Jake, yes, the NCAA tournament men's basketball was a 48-team field.
1980.
Oh, what do you know? 80 to 82, it was 48 teams. 83, it went to 52, and then in 85 to 64.
NCAA casually leaving out details.
What's that?
NCAA is casually leaving out details of the NCAA tournament expansion.
Now, I do know this as well. 84 was the last year of the – now, imagine this. Imagine the consolation game. So 84 was the last year that they had the Final Four consolation game. Can you imagine losing on Saturday – in the Final Four for the right to play for the national title game and then having to come back and play the consolation game to see who finished third? The last consolation winner was Virginia over Louisiana State. I'm 90% – no, it was either 84 or 81. 81 was the last consolation game. Virginia beat LSU in the consolation game. Can you imagine what a buzzkill that'd be? Like, all right, we're number 3. Hell yeah. I don't know if they played that on Sunday or like on Monday morning, but can you imagine? Hey, guys, I know that you thought we were going to go to the national title game and be in one shining moment, but we got one game left. What a total buzzkill that would be. But the expansion, I get it, the almighty dollar. And it's hard to compete with the almighty dollar. But the NCAA, if they expand their college basketball tournament, what they are doing is once again showing what we all know. And I'm not mad at them for it. I disagree with it, but I'm not mad at them for it. But just come out and say, we are a not-for-profit that's here for profit. Just say it. You told me forever that the reason you couldn't do a college football tournament and a college football playoff was because it took too much time away from the classroom for your student athletes, yet you have all of them doing a month-long tournament in the month of March, which is right in the heart of the end of a second semester of classes, and a college football playoff, for the most part, at most public universities, takes place during actual holiday break. So the hypocrisy runs rampant. It runs rampant. So just out with it. Admit it. It's all about the buck. And will people get used to it and fall in line and just continue now to do NCAA tournament brackets that have 88 teams instead of 68? Probably. But I don't really think there are that many people that are turning backflips because they're like, hallelujah, 18 and 15 Drexel got in, and so too did 15 and 17 Vatek. Let's go. Come on, just admit it, man. It's all about the cash. We know it. Called in. A fair point. Jake, you're a hypocrite. How can you talk about how the NBA does not alter games for the sake of money, but the NCAA tournament is about to do exactly that for the sake of money? Fair. Fair point to point out that hypocrisy from my behalf, except for this. The NCAA tournament is not expanding the tournament to get in bigger market teams. And the NBA, to Jeremiah's point, the television contract has already been signed. So the NBA is bringing in mega billions of dollars in television revenue, whether or not it's the Charlotte Hornets and the Oklahoma City Thunder or the New York Knicks and LA Lakers. The money's already been spent. The advertising's already been sold. The number of eyeballs are inconsequential, truthfully, because those deals have already been long since passed. And that's why when it comes to the NBA and what happens when the TV contracts get signed and agents are hip to this, I call it the Lance Stevenson effect. What do you mean, Jake, by the Lance Stevenson effect? I'll explain. When Lance Stevenson was a free agent and his contract was coming up in Indiana, and if you recall, as the Pacers were marching their way to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Miami Heat, and Lance Stevenson was emerging as a major contributor and a star, certainly a fan favorite, and an X factor. He was the Aaron Nesmith of that team. You know, Paul George was the Tyrese Halliburton. He was the straw mixed in the drink. David West was the Pascal Siakam. He was the veteran. But Lance Stevenson was the Aaron Nesmith. He was the guy making the glue plays, right? And with each month, as people were looking at the contracts of that Pacers group, it was like, man, is Lance Stevenson starting to play his way out of the Indiana's affordability of him? And Stevenson, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but when Lance Stevenson became a free agent that year, the Pacers offered him a 5-year deal for a larger per-year average than what the Hornets offered Lance Stevenson. And the Hornets offered him a 4-year deal for even less money, and he took it. And people literally were like, what in the world is this guy doing? What a complete moron. Who is his agent? What in the world? Why would you do that? Well, the reason why is because in that year that Stevenson came out, the NBA was 4 years from the new collective bargaining agreement and television contract being signed. So every player in the NBA knew that the summer of, and I'm thinking that it was like 2016 was when this all happened, so the summer of 2020. I could be off in a year or two, but for the sake of the discussion, you get what I'm saying. So all the players knew the summer of 2020, that's the year that you want to be a free agent because the new television money is going to come in that year. The cap is going to rise right then, and so teams are going to have to meet the cap minimum, and the contracts are going to go through the roof. This is why when you look back, you know, every 2 to 3 years you have a free agency period where it goes insane. And Othello Harrington's getting like a $100 million deal. And Gilbert Arenas is getting $110 million. And Brian Cardinal's getting $58 million. And it's because these teams have this surplus, this Niagara Falls avalanche of cash coming in, and the cap gets altered for that first year of it, and every player wants to be in line that year because everybody wants that to be the year they're a free agent because bada boom, bada bang, that's the big contract year because the TV money all comes in at once, and it is massive. That shows you how much money, how much television money there is in the NBA to the point where it drives and motivates players to strategize themselves to be free agents because in a new television contract signing year, you're better off being a Tier 2 free agent than you are being a Tier 1 free agent unless you're a supermax guy elsewhere. And because that money is so massive. And that money is massive and already signed, sealed, and delivered for the next 6 years or whatever it is, regardless of whether the NBA Finals has Los Angeles or Saskatoon in it. That's just the reality of it. The NCAA tournament does such a huge television number in revenue, and just now the interesting thing about expanding to the games, that they get eyeballs, and so the television numbers for the NCAA tournament, they're wanting to expand it because they're in a, I don't know the negotiating period of it, but they are, with this expansion, probably talking about doing that in a year where the TV contract is up, and so therefore you get Turner and CBS to spend that much more money to the not-for-profit NCAA versus, for 84 games versus 68 or whatever it may be, or teams. You get what I'm saying? But it's not necessarily for gate, because you don't get, I've always felt like in the one area where there is bias in the NCAA tournament for certain is, I do think that there are, I've always said this, I do think in the NCAA there are teams that can get in over others on the bubble, because in Indiana you can send a Spokane to play at 10 o'clock on a Friday, and that's going to sell more tickets than if you are sending James Madison there to play against Texas Tech. And so, therefore, I think that when it comes down to the bubble, the profile and the travel of teams does come into play a little bit. Yes, sir?
Can we round out the second hour of the program with a little congratulations, a little celebration here?
Sure.
Tucker Barnhart, Tucker Barnhart of Brownsburg, Indiana.
Yes,
congratulations to him. He has now officially been in Major League Baseball for 10 seasons.
It's pretty impressive, isn't it?
It is very impressive.
Only
8 seasons
10?
with the
It
Reds.
feels like longer than that.
He was with the Reds for 8 years, and then he's bounced around a handful of other teams with the Tigers, Cubs, Diamondbacks. Now he's currently with the Texas Rangers.
What about, so Lance Lynn, how long did Lance Lynn play?
Ooh, good question.
Because weren't they in the same group? I know they were a couple of years apart, I believe. But Drew Storen, Lance Lynn, and Tucker Barnhart, weren't they all like in the same grouping coming up?
I don't think so. I think it was Lance Lynn and Drew Storen.
I knew that, but I thought Tucker Barnhart was, he was right behind him, right?
Tucker's 4 years younger than Lance Lynn.
Okay, so he was right behind them then. What a grouping though, right?
Lance Lynn, 13 years in Major League Baseball.
Okay.
Of course, he announced his retirement earlier this year.
I knew that. Yeah, I knew that. He had a really good career.
And of
it's
course,
amazing.
Drew Storen is a successful businessman now.
So that's right. He's got the, is it bourbon or whiskey that's made out of the Field of Dreams?
I think it's whiskey.
Do you know the difference between whiskey and bourbon, Eddie?
No, it's what is it?
Do you know the difference? All bourbons are whiskeys, but not all whiskeys are bourbon.
That's
bourbon by nature. Bourbon got its name and got its start, not its name, but bourbon got its start many, many moons ago when there was whiskey from Kentucky that was being transported down the Mississippi River into Louisiana. And in some of the barrels that were being transported, they ran out of whiskey barrels, so they didn't think anything of it, and they put it inside of barrels that formerly had charred, I believe, like cornstarch in it that had been charred, but nonetheless they were charred barrels that they put it in. So the whiskey got to Louisiana, and they opened it up, and they're like, wait a minute, this whiskey has a different color tone to it now and a different flavoring and alteration to it, and it must be because it came from inside of these charred barrels. And so therefore bourbon is a whiskey that is aged inside of a charred barrel versus a regular whiskey itself.
My alcoholic friend says it is it's a bourbon, not a whiskey. I misspoke there. Field of Dreams bourbon.
Your alcoholic friend?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know that you should be making those slanderous allegations.
Well, if he wants to slander me, or I guess it's more of a libel when it's a cross text message to you, then he should be able to take the slander.
Fair enough.
From time to time.
Fair enough. We'll come back. Pacers next. We're going to get back into it. Kevin Bowen going to join us as well. And I want to get to this for our Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday. There are a lot of people out there. You hear a lot of discussion about this, and that is the different solutions of injections that people take, whether it be for diabetes, for weight loss, Question is, what about that for your heart? What does that mean for your heart? A heart doctor friend from Franciscan to discuss exactly that in just about 35 minutes. So last night, here's what happened. If you watched the Pacers and the Knicks, and I did so last night at Britton Tavern up at 141st in Cumberland, Thanks to all who came out. We had a great time. Mick Ultra Zero, Anheuser-Busch putting on our viewing party, and it was great fun. It was great to see everybody and meet new folks that listen to the program. Two, Eddie, not one, two different female listeners came up yesterday.
Oh, really? Which ones? Do you remember?
We're up to 22 now. Up to 22. I'm so bad with remembering names, and I'm terribly apologetic about that. A group from Jasper, which was fabulous. Kathy was one of them, and then
Kathy Denise.
It wasn't Kathy. No, that's Cindy Denise.
Sydney Denise. Yeah. That's right.
And then one who is one of the Uber drivers for the company. But they were great. Everybody was great. A lot of fun. But
so
what the
Uncle
Knicks
Jake's
did last
taxi
night
was not needed, is what you're saying?
No, Mick Ultra Zero. NA, baby. One of the things that the Knicks did last night was they began picking up Halliburton at a much earlier time. And in doing that, they basically cut off the snake at the head, if I'm going to be that gross in saying it. But the Pacers' offense is so predicated upon when Halliburton gets the ball on an entry pass, either a quick pass down the floor, or he then accelerates to the basket and then backs out and sets up their offense. They were picking him up so early that then allowed for New York's defensive players to get in position and to basically out-physical Indiana in a half-court set. And the Pacers were just never able to get things going. And I think they also became a little bit reliant upon falling back on resting on their laurels of, hey, we're always in it because look how many times we have snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. And finally, last night, the law of averages came into play where they just could not get over that hump. It was a frustrating game to watch for sure because you knew what the reality was and that it was going to be tough going in the Garden, going in New York and that crowd and the atmosphere and all of that. But you just kept waiting for it to get uncorked. And a couple of mini runs, but nothing major. And there's a level of frustration that comes with that. Joining us now on the program, he's on the Rhine Guys Brewery guest line. You hear him every morning, of course, with James Boyd and Jeff Rickard on the Fan Morning Show. Kevin Bowen joining us. Kevin, I will allow you, perhaps at your hesitation, I don't know, but to opine on this. I know you guys talked about it this morning. We talked a lot about, and maybe we're getting lost at an individual tree through the forest, but I thought Pascal Siakam after the game and his exchange with Greg Doyle, and I mentioned it earlier. I mean, I know that Greg with the Caitlin Clark thing, there's a benefit of the doubt maybe that is lost there. I did not think that Greg's question was out of line. I thought it was a fair question of, if you are telling me as the athlete that the other team played harder than you tonight, my follow-up is, what do you think they did to do that? What did they do to limit the effort you guys were putting out? Maybe it was execution versus effort that was the issue. I didn't think Greg was out of line, and I thought Siakam was a little flippant in his answer. Kevin, what say you?
Yeah, I'd probably nod my head at a lot of that. You know, there's certainly recent history, even with Greg and Tyrese Halliburton. I think that's probably where Siakam's frustration is a little bit more rooted. If I could speak for him, that's me just offering my opinion. I don't know that for sure, but you know, Ty wasn't too happy with him a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I mean, when you know, Pascal offers that up, I totally understand the question. I mean, Greg asks questions in a very different manner than a lot of other people ask questions, and you know, it can sound terse and direct and all of that. And I think when you probably couple that with the loss and the fact that it was him asking and not, I don't know, Dustin Dupirac or Tony East or, you know, one of the members of the New York media, that's where you get Pascal to respond in the manner that he did. And I also think, like, the viral clip going on social media, you know, if you watch the full press conference, I thought, you know, Greg's question before they get into the back and forth was a very fine delivery of it. And that part of it, I don't think is making the rounds.
I guess my thing is this. Somebody said, like, oh, Jake, you're just sticking up for Greg because, like him, you get a free media credential and a free dinner at the Pacer games. I don't use a media credential for the Pacer games. I've never picked up a media credential this year for the Pacer games. But having said that, I do think that there's an element of, I mean, people jump up and down that they want players to be held accountable and they want the media to, you know, ask tough questions. And then the media asks a tough question and people get upset about it. It's like, you're kind of damned if you – little damned if you do and damned if you don't, right?
Yeah, yes, I would agree wholeheartedly with that. So I had no No real issue with it. Again, delivery-wise, I don't know. He asks questions in a different style than I ask questions. You ask questions in a different style than I ask questions. I mean, to each their own. And I think there's an opportunity with Siakam, especially where at that moment he easily could have said, yeah, that's what's so frustrating about it. I don't understand how, we got out hustled in such a big game because we should be hungry. We should be, I don't know how he could have answered it, in a different manner. So when the question was asked, in no way, because I watched the press conference, I watched the press conference live last night. And so this is prior to the viral clip, as Greg is asking the question after Pascal had offered up in the press conference, we got outworked, out-hustled, however he phrased it. I thought to myself, oh, yeah, that's an interesting way. Knowing Siakam, he usually is a very thoughtful answer giver. I thought to myself, oh, yeah, that's a fair question. I wonder if Pascal will go there. And then once it got a little contentious, I just think neither party was going to win. Greg is not going to back out of that, knowing how he usually operates, and given, I assume, this is my assumption, given that Pascal is probably a little rubbed the wrong way by how Greg had his interaction with Tyrese Halliburton and that column and not talking to the media after whatever game that was, neither party was going to easily back out of it. And if you watch the press conference throughout, Pascal looks over at him a couple of different times and makes some other comments to him the rest of the press conference. So, yeah, it was probably a no-win situation after that.
Fair enough. Kevin, as for the game itself, other than what I just pointed out in my observation at least about how New York defended Tyrese Halliburton at an earlier point on the floor, pushed him out a little bit, prohibited Indiana from getting into the real flow of the motion of their offense, what were your overall observations from the way things unfolded last night that Indiana now needs to repair?
Well, I thought the starting group in general was just terrible, absolutely awful, all five of them, and Halliburton's lack of aggression, I think, contributed significantly to that. There were a couple of moments in the first half where, I thought he had actually either Karl Anthony Towns on him via a switch or even created an advantage with Karl Anthony Towns on him and didn't, do anything with it. And I was really dumbfounded by it because he was so successful with that the previous game, whether it was Karl Anthony Towns or Mitchell Robinson. And so, basically I'm left a little bit more confused than it all. And I get it. Miles Bridges picked him up, 5-10 feet, a little bit more. It's not like he denied him 90 feet like Max Strus was doing at times in that Cavs series. So I think that's giving Tyrese way too much benefit of the doubt. I'm left probably confused mostly, and I get that some Pacers fans probably wouldn't use the word confused. They would use disappointed, frustrated, whatever. But I just don't understand how a player that is so willing to embrace the clutch, so willing to, throw up a choke sign, throw up a Dame time, celebrate like he is, to have those passive moments that do pop up. This is not the first time we have seen games like this where he just is not the aggressive nature that he was in Game 4. And look, you're going to have games where you don't score or games you turn the ball over. That's part of basketball. But when you don't assert yourself to the point where no other starter is playing well, they're all looking to you, Reggie Miller's begging you to do something to try and get your team back in it, and yet you continue to defer, that to me is just, it's confusing. There's like a misunderstanding. I don't really get it. And I struggled to kind of answer that question of why you don't see a little bit more assertiveness from him when, again, he's thrived in so many of these settings.
Kevin, here's one thing. Kevin Bowen is our guest here on the Rhine Geist Brewery guest line. One of the things just about now, I guess my hesitation of why it was such a missed opportunity last night, my fear is this, and you've been in these situations, you've seen it. When they come back for Game 6 tomorrow night, there's going to be such a nervous energy amongst everybody in that building of like, it's this powder keg that's wanting to explode and everybody wants it to be this celebration. But if it gets late in that game, even though it's New York that has to technically win it, it feels the invert of that, and that Indiana, all the pressure is going to be on them, and there's going to be like this holding of the breath gasp in that building that can hold the Pacers down a little bit. Is this just PTSD on my behalf, or is there some reality to that?
No, and I think, when New York got off to a great start last night, the ability for Indiana to create that at Madison Square Garden largely exited. And I think you said something to the effect of, before I got on air with you, something like you never really made a real push at them. Like, did Thibodeau ever really have to take a serious timeout last night? No, it was Carlisle taking all of those. So, if you could have got it to 5 or 6, something like that, now all of a sudden that nervous energy, Madison Square Garden probably times 10, frankly. But yeah, I think that is a question that you have for tomorrow when, you would be the perfect person to ask, Jake. I think it's the biggest home sporting event for the Pacers or the Colts since the 2006 AFC title game. I think it has that magnitude of it, of you have a home opportunity to get to the finals. And yeah, people could point to maybe the 2009 AFC title game as well. But at that point, you'd already won a Super Bowl, and I don't want to act like it's house money, but to me, this one is even higher in that. And, NBA-wise, even if you want to point to other Eastern Conference Finals opportunities away from home, the Miami series, that's still LeBron, and it's on the road. This is different. Like, Brunson is not LeBron, and it's in your own building. So I think tomorrow it can be equally as momentous of an atmosphere as we have seen in years in this city. And the flip side of it is, if it doesn't go well, then yeah, it is viewed in a much, much different light. But if you're able to get that done tomorrow, that is a where were you when this happened type of moment for our city, for that franchise. And, again, I've said it before, I think of all the titles that would be possible, and I don't know, maybe IU fans would say, hey, have you realized how long it's been? I think of all the titles possible, Pacers, Purdue, Notre Dame, Indiana, Colts, I don't think there's anything like what a Pacer parade would do, would resonate, would mean to our audience here. And so I think when you add up all of that, tomorrow is really unlike any environment we've had in quite some time.
I've thought about this. We probably shouldn't plan the parade here, right? When the Colts won the Super Bowl, it was like -5 outside. Norman Cox of Channel 6 is standing on Monument Circle doing live shots, screaming to everybody that the parade's been canceled because it's too cold, and he's wearing a Cleveland Browns hat. Nobody knows what's going on. And then they got literally 7 golf carts with some float things out of storage from the 500 Festival and took it down Meridian Street and down Capitol and then into the Dome, and that was the parade, right? This city would have to do a proper warm weather, big-time parade if they get 5 more wins, right? It'll be the biggest explosion ever, will it not?
Oh, easily. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I even think the Colts had to plan a parade when they got to the Final Four in 2014. I think part of that goes into when you get that fall. I would assume there are people within the Pacers organization that, again, would not reveal that publicly. But, yes, you have to do some planning for such a moment. So yes, up and down, I don't know, Pennsylvania and I down Georgia. Delaware, all of it. Yeah, it would be. Yes, it would have to be. Yeah, I'm picturing Mark Madsen dancing at a Lakers parade.
The best, right? Who's the goofy dancer? Which Pacer would be the goofy dancer?
Oh boy, probably Thomas Bryant.
Yeah, that's a good call. That's a good call. He emotion gets the best of that guy, right?
Yeah, probably Thomas Bryant for sure.
Fair.
Yeah.
All right, Kevin, let's switch. Kevin Bowen, our guest, Ryan Geist Brewery guest line. Let's switch to the Colts. For those of us that were not there, summarize what you saw and maybe what you were looking for that you didn't see out of OTAs.
Well, the caveat is always we're talking about, 15 11-on-11 snaps of football on May 28th when they're not wearing full pads. So if we all can get on the same page. As of that, I saw Anthony Richardson inaccurate a bit during the individual period, had a great first 7-on-7 session. Then I would say rockier the rest of the way. Did have a couple drops, Jelani Woods and A.D. Mitchell. Created some big plays, but you definitely had some inconsistency just on really the stuff we've probably seen, honestly, over the last couple of years. Daniel Jones, steady, much steadier. He had one incompletion that happened to be an interception. Or I should say, should have been an interception. Richardson was picked off in one of his incompletions. I guess to probably summarize it for those that weren't there, Jones looked like a guy that started 70 games in the NFL and is probably a little bit more of a steady-ish quarterback, certainly compared to Richardson. And Richardson looked like a guy that, had some ups, had some downs, and a guy that's been a little bit more inconsistent as a thrower. So they split him. Sounds like they'll split him here for the next 3 weeks, starting reps, that is. Again, we only get one viewing each week, so they had an OTA yesterday. They just wrapped up one today, so that's part of their schedule here. But, yes, that's how I would assess the very, very, very early and abbreviated look at the quarterback.
When you look at Tyler Warren in the limited, and again, Kevin, I appreciate you giving that disclaimer because, I get a kick out of it when people are like, beautiful thrown ball, and I'm like, it's May here. Okay, let's calm down. But when you look at Tyler Warren and your first real glance of seeing him just in terms of reps, and you've seen him, I guess, in the college games that you've watched him, does Tyler Warren strike you as, and we were talking about this yesterday, a bruising Jeremy Shockey, Mark Bavaro level, like throw it to me at 8 yards and I'm going to turn around and barrel over people for another 5 and now we got a first down type tight end, or a Dallas Clark, I'm almost more of a slot who has speed and can play through contact level tight end?
Yeah, you watched him at Penn State, it was some bully ball. Like, I know, Chris Bauer probably wouldn't love me making a comp to Gronk, but there was a little bit of like, hey, he can throw you out of the club. I mean, I'll go back to that Orange Bowl game against Notre Dame. He threw some Notre Dame defenders off of them that, like, those dudes don't get thrown out of the club. And, he had that effect. But I also think when you watch him move, he does move just more fluidly is probably the best way to put it than other tight ends. And I think it really helps when you honestly watch all the Colts tight ends like go through position drills and you just see, and for the most part, the Colts I think have a fairly athletic tight end room. But still, he just moves in much more of a fluid, not clunky manner is probably the best way I could describe it. And it was really, I thought, on display very well on Wednesday. He caught balls from both quarterbacks very routinely, and some big passes, some underneath stuff, a variety of, different catches that he had. So, yeah, there is probably the question. I think there's a question on two sides of it. Like, can you continue to be a bully in the NFL? I mean, these are obviously grown men. And then the flip side is, he didn't test throughout the process. I mean, if you want to really nitpick maybe one element to it, I mean, that does rub the Colts the wrong way when you don't work out, you don't do the testing. Was that a little bit of hesitancy of like, yeah, if I run the 40-yard dash, it's probably not going to look great on a stopwatch? That might be true, but boy, I mean, I think his football speed is still very acceptable. And again, he just moved. I mean, some guys maybe not be great track testers, but they just move really well. And I'm probably not describing it in the best manner, but there's just kind of a natural fluidity that I don't think every tight end has. Kevin,
lastly, Kevin Bowen, our guest, I don't know that you and I can't recall actually the loss of Jim Irsay, we all have talked about, and I think there's, plenty has been said, rightly and understandably so, about the impact of the man on the city, the philanthropy, the kind heart, the eccentricities, certainly. But at what point do we start to get, and I don't know, Kevin, I don't know if it's the right time or when is the right time to start to get into this kind of a thing. But we've seen it in this town with, for example, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and with the passing of Mary Holman George, and then, the next generation's probably almost necessity of having to sell that property. I'm not saying that the Irsay girls are going to sell the Colts. I don't want it to infer that. But at what point do we start to get a clearer understanding as to the transition of the business model of it and more so the security thereof?
Well, I mean, outside of, I guess, Carly Irsay-Gordon's words, I don't know how deep into the details we'll necessarily get on that. I think that's pretty apparent across all professional sports. I don't think ownership groups, families, get too into the weeds with that stuff. I think it was back in, 2011 maybe, when the three daughters added kind of the vice chair owner label. How much legally at that point, did they do behind the scenes to try and whatever offset or lessen, taxes down the road. mean, I've never gotten the vibe, never gotten the impression that it would be anything else other than Carly, especially, trying to continue to operate as her family owning this football team. It's not, not to like get into like families and, necessarily, how one generation lives compared to the generation above them. But, if you look at it, Jim's 3 daughters all have lived here pretty much their entire lives. I mean, yes, some of them, Carly being one of them, did go to college outside of the state, but they have lived here at a very young age and have decided to all raise their children. Even Casey, the middle one, who's not as organizationally involved as the other 2. You don't see that very often, like 3, hey, we have 3 kids and they all decided to grow to live here in the city that they were raised. Like, that's not a given. So, they easily could have, chosen to live somewhere else or get away from it all, or, not work for the organization. And really, especially with Carly and Kaylin, the oldest and the youngest, they've been heavily involved. So, at some point, I assume, here in 2025, Carly probably, I would hope before maybe the start of the season, maybe has a bit of a, sit down or press conference or however you want to describe it, just to kind of give a little bit of glimpse into who she is and how she plans to go about things. But I don't expect anything too significantly detailed in the public of like, oh, this is where we're at and this is the percentages and, this is how things have operated behind the scenes.
Kevin Bowen, of course, you can hear him coming up Monday morning, and we will see whether or not it is in preview of the NBA Finals for the Pacers. Obviously, a game left before that, or at least one win left to get. That would be the next opportunity for that tomorrow night at the Fieldhouse. Kevin, appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend, all right?
Yeah, you guys have a great weekend. Thank you.
All right, Kevin Bowen joining us on the show. Man, a lot to unpack. And again, probably time for another time with the Colts stuff, but it'll be interesting to see over the next, I think, year or so that will kind of clear itself out in terms of our understanding of where things happen with that. It is Friday, by the way, Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday. And yesterday had somebody come up to me that they just got a heart. Matter of fact, I take that back. 2 people last night when I was at Britton Tavern said that they got a heart scan. Heart scans obviously so critically important to do. Just $49. You could self-refer when it comes to that. And we will get to that coming up in just a moment. Also want to let you know that we have a $30 gift card to Chicago's Pizza to give away. We will do that coming up about 20 minutes from right now. But when we return, talking about the heart health and cardiovascular health, and of course, Franciscan Health is the number 1 option when it comes to your heart scans. You can get the $49 scan. You can self-refer. You can pay out of pocket. You get a heart health risk assessment with it, and Franciscan Health is the number 1 place to do that. Simply Google Franciscan Health /screening bundles to find out more information about that. But you hear a lot of talk about, and they are becoming more and more prevalent, obviously, different weight loss injections that people have had. And one of the questions that I had was, look, these I know are for people typically with diabetes or predisposed to diabetes or simply trying to lose weight. But what does that mean for your heart? Anytime that you are injecting something into your body, what does it mean for your heart? And I thought it was an incredibly important conversation to have. So we got one of the doctors from Franciscan Health to join us to answer that exact question, because I think it's an important one that I hope you will lend your ear towards next as we return here to Query & Company on a Friday, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. It is a Friday. You know what that means? It means it is time for a Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday. And I love every so often when this affords me the opportunity to talk to some of the great physicians at the Franciscan Health Indiana Doctors Network and all of the different doctors that are working throughout the state with Franciscan. And that includes my next guest, who I'm very excited to have on the program because he is now by title, and I told him, folks, listen, I read ball scores for a living. So when somebody says that they are a cardiometabolic director, I think to myself, well, that's very impressive. And then I naturally have to say, now, what exactly does that entail? What that essentially means, and I will have Dr. Tony Bashel explain whether or not I'm in the correct category or area here. But, Doctor, I believe what that means is that you have an expertise in cardiovascular health and as it relates to both one's weight and perhaps weight loss as well, and just their overall metabolic health in relating to its heart. Now, did I get within close to the right category there?
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Okay, so let's begin with this. This, I think, Doctor, is a really important and timely conversation when we look at medicine today, and that is because what we now know is that there are an increased number of medications available that, as I understand it, were originally designed for people who were dealing with issues in terms of diabetes, but that became then, it was discovered there were various benefits besides just weight loss that can come from the different drugs we hear about, like the GLP-1, Ozempic. There's a number of different names for these medications. People know what I'm talking about. And my question is for you the following. Heart health is so important to me. I wanted to give the opportunity to explore whether or not folks that were doing this were at risk cardiovascular-wise, or in fact, their heart considered this to be a friend of theirs, what it is that we now see medically speaking. So with that, Doctor, I appreciate the time. The floor is yours to explore that topic.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Jake. Really appreciate the opportunity. I'm just going to jump on that straight away. These medications, the categories, the Ozempics, the Wegovy's, the Mounjaro, Zepbounds, have clearly been shown to be a friend of the heart. And the really nice thing is the weight loss is just a happy side effect. Now, that helps the heart, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But they clearly have been shown before weight loss occurs to help protect against certain heart conditions. And in some conditions where people have versions of heart failure, they help patients feel better. And what does that mean to a patient with a heart condition, particularly heart failure? Feeling bad means you struggle to breathe. You struggle to do your day-to-day activities. And we dogs, we often kind of say, oh, well, it's just heart failure. But that doesn't always mean something to a patient or a person or the population. But it means people struggle to breathe. And these drugs can often help people function better. In addition, when people have had heart attacks or have had strokes or have had blockage in their leg, we can use these drugs and it reduces the risk of that occurring again. So once again, we actually think with people who have blockage in their legs, which is a form of cholesterol plaque buildup, it helps them exert further. So they really, truly are a wonder drug. And I've only just kind of scratched the surface. Although I predominantly deal with cardiovascular, it has been shown the drugs help people with kidney disease, with liver disease, with knee pain, and we think they will actually reduce the incidence of dementia, and those trials are ongoing. For those people who are struggling with smoking, and I used to be a former smoker, so I know how hard it is, often they can help them quit smoking, and they just have this amazing effect. And people will often say to me, well, Tony, how on earth can this drug do all these things? Well, people have to remember they mimic natural substances in the body. So when we eat, we release natural versions of Mounjaro and natural versions of Ozempic. And these signaling molecules go throughout the body, improving the function of our organs, improving how it works. And one of the nice things they do, they go to the brain, or the areas of the brain that really drive us to say, eat, 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 and they switch it off. And it helps us calm that food noise down. So it helps us to eat in a more controlled fashion, to reduce our consumption. So yeah, a resounding yes, they're an incredible category of medication, a game changer.
Now, Doctor, oftentimes we hear about, obviously, weight loss affecting the heart. I mean, I think we all know that that's beneficial to the heart to not have as much, as somebody explained it to me once, less mattress over the heart itself, if you will, and pressure on it with body fat. The natural way of losing body fat has always been, until now, obviously, exercise, diet. I mean, that goes without saying.
Yeah.
At the risk of sounding overly naive here, is there any risk or shock to the body when these medications are causing one, if you will, to non-organically lose weight? Does the body catch up to, or is it aware of what is happening, and thus it is able to keep up with things on a natural level?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because they mimic a natural mechanism and help people reduce caloric intake, people lose weight. Now, occasionally you'll have the patient who loses too much too quickly, and you have to slow the amount down. That does happen, but that's kind of rare. But because they have these anti-inflammatory effects, these natural weight loss effects, they're really highly beneficial. And let me kind of flip that narrative around a little bit. If a person is, say, obese level 1, they have a 5 to 6 times risk of premature heart disease. If you go to higher degrees of obesity, your risk of heart disease can be as much as 15 to 20 times higher than people at an appropriate body weight. And this is kind of a scary statistic, and I don't really want to scare people listening to this, but these have been clearly shown. So if you use a combination of diet and exercise, which I recommend to all my patients, and particularly cardiovascular mixed with resistance exercise, this is highly beneficial. But study after study has shown we don't really get the weight loss we need. So, for example, we were saying recently, we had a big rugby tournament coming in this week, and like the collegiate rugby are coming in. And these athletes are very strong and powerful, but often when they step away from their sport and they start to gain weight, suddenly the diet and exercise doesn't always get enough to help people get their weight off. And this is where medication like the ones we've been discussing do come into play and are incredibly cardioprotective. And the nice thing about it, if you do carry excess weight, you don't necessarily have to get it all off to show benefit. 10% to 15% of your body weight seems to be a magic number that you start to show improved cardiovascular outcomes when you get to this level, plus improved outcomes in other organ systems as well, but particularly the heart and the kidney and the liver have been shown to improve when you hit this level. So do I like to combine diet and exercise with medication at 100%? But the medication just add that additional layer of benefit. And the studies tend to show 15%, 20, 25% weight loss. It can really be quite achievable.
I'll tell you the one thing, Doctor, that I wanted to ask as well that was of concern to me that I saw, and then I thought I'm probably reading an article that is not well informed, okay? And that is there has been speculation that this medication can reduce muscle mass, and as a result, I saw somebody that said it's shrinking your heart. The muscles in your heart are being deteriorated because of these medications. Fact or fiction?
Let me take both of those on. When people tend to be bigger, the heart muscle often gets thicker, and that's bad news in the heart. It leads to heart failure. So in some instances, you do see a reversal of muscle, but that's a good effect in the heart. This is a debate, and a lot of people have this debate out. There is one argument: you lose size of muscle, and the muscle is you lose muscle and you have muscle wasting. The other argument is you generally lose weight, the muscle loses fat deposits, it loses fluid, and it's actually a healthier, fitter, stronger muscle. And a lot of the tests used to assess muscle in these studies where you quoted are not really designed to assess the muscle in an appropriate fashion. So there's a couple of different arguments, right? The jury's out a little bit, but generally speaking, there is an argument out there, and I tend to be a little bit on this side. As you lose weight, you do some resistance exercises, your muscle's a little smaller, but it's fitter, healthier, and stronger. And your body is generally smaller, so the muscle in relation to your body size is actually a more healthy component. That said, if you're a particularly smaller, frailer person, sometimes we do think twice about using it on people who are particularly thin. But that doesn't usually rotate. So people who carry excess weight tend to have bigger muscle. Those bigger muscles aren't always the strongest and healthiest as well. And we think some people will actually see healthier muscle, but the jury's still a little bit out on this one.
Dr. Tony Basil, again, cardiometabolic director in Shelbyville, but also Franciscan Health within the Indiana Physicians Network. Doctor, the last thing for you here would be this, and that is when you go to bed at night and you think to yourself about cardiovascular health and something that you feel is the most common misconception, the most common misunderstanding that people have, or just simply the thing that you think to yourself, if I had a magic wand and could inform everybody about their heart health, I would want them to know this. It would be what?
I think the number one thing physicians assess patients on is symptoms. Do you have symptoms? Are you short of breath? Do you have chest pain? Are you dizzy? Many people who are at high risk of heart disease don't have any perceived symptoms. And you would need your physician to be willing to kind of pursue some simple, safe, affordable testing to unmask symptoms and get to disease early or before it begins and prevent it. So, for example, with the heart, believe it or not, I would check the lifeline screen on a heart scan. I think it's absolutely very important for people to get. And believe it or not, checking whether you have protein in your urine can tell your increased risk for heart disease, and then consider evaluations of liver labs as well. These 3 tests can go a long way to assessing your risk, whether you're symptomatic or not. And a lot of people who are obese with underlying hidden disease don't perceive symptoms. So don't be fooled by, well, I'm just a little short of breath at the top of the stairs. And if we can get to disease early, we can go a long way to preventing death and heart damage and basically helping you feel better, because as you lose weight with these meds, people feel better.
Doctor, I appreciate the time. I certainly appreciate the information, and it goes without saying, I appreciate the work you do in terms of cardiovascular health and helping people through that journey. We have a golf outing coming up on August 7th that is to benefit the Franciscan Foundation. So I have no idea whether or not you are as good with the driver as you are with explaining the heart, but if you are, we'll see you there. All right?
Thanks. I really appreciate this. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it very much, Doctor. Have a wonderful weekend.
Cheers, Jake.
Dr. Tony Bashel from Franciscan Health. By the way, #1 heart program in Indiana for cardiology by Health Grades, #1 in Indiana for interventional coronary care and major cardiac surgery by CareChecks. And heart scans, just $49. You can self-refer, pay out of pocket, and you get a free heart health risk assessment included with every screening. You simply cannot afford to not get the scan. Just 833-238-0688, not just. 833-238-0688 is the telephone number. 833-238-0688 or franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles for more information. We'll come back. We'll put a tie on all of it, and we'll hand it off to John, who's going to be rocking and rolling all weekend long, and I'll let him explain that to you as well on the other side. I will tell you right now, there is a little bit of FOMO in the fact that, like, when the Pacers beat New York to go to the NBA Finals in 2000, I was living in St. Louis. And I think they're going to do it tomorrow night. I really hope they do. Although, I really do. I have said before, it would not surprise me if they drop tomorrow night as well and then go back and win Game 7 in New York. Because I think they are going to win the series. But I'll be in Detroit for IndyCar, so we will be going somewhere tomorrow night and watching it, I assume. Myself, Nick Yeoman, Michael Young, Mark Janes. I'm assuming we'll all be getting together and watching the game somewhere in Detroit. I have contemplated driving back. We're done at 2 o'clock on track tomorrow. It would give me time to drive back. Problem is the game would end at like 11, and I got to drive them back to Detroit and get up early and do the race broadcast on Sunday. Probably not the wisest thing in the world. But I know, like, Shannon in particular, how much it would mean to her to see the Pacers go to the finals, and she's not going to be able to be there either. And so
that would be only fitting, right? For them to lose Game 5, come back home Game 6. You and Shannon, both diehard Pacer fans, and you're both out of town and wouldn't be able to enjoy it.
I know. But nonetheless, the important thing is that they would get into the finals then, and that's big for certain.
What would they need to do? What do they need to do in Game 6, Jake?
Excellent question. I think there are a couple of things that Indiana needs to do. Number one, be prepared for New York's continued physicality and play through that. And the way you play through that is the first thing they need to do is when they need to probably have somebody fall back when they inbound to Halliburton to be able to set a single screen even to get him then free to take off so that they're not checking him so early and then stalling the Pacers' offense. They need Nembhard to show up. And I don't mean that show up. That's not to say that he's been absent. I mean, he's a good defender, but
they need him to be more effective and efficient as a scorer. I mean, 6 of 26 the last 3 games.
No question. I mean, Nembhard's got to get going a little bit. And I think they need to set the pace in terms of the tempo. They've allowed New York too much, and to an extent they did it as well. They allowed New York this in Game 3. Like, they need to be the ones that are, or in Game 4, I mean. They need to be the ones setting the tempo and the tone of the pace that they're going to play. And then the last thing is they've got to limit and continue to be aggressive on Karl Anthony Towns because he's a dynamic player. I mean, Brunson, you kind of know what you're getting. You almost feel like if Brunson is having his game, it is much easier to play New York when Brunson's in rhythm than it is if Towns is in rhythm. Because if Towns is in rhythm, that means that it allows them to take Brunson out in periods, and their offense runs more fluid when Brunson's not on the floor at times, as great a player as he is. Because when Brunson has the ball in his hands, as good as he is, at least you know where things are channeling and funneling. But you might be thinking to yourself, you know what? I can't go to the game. I don't have tickets to the game. I'm going to watch the game, and if the Pacers win, I'm going to be a part of the radio station in celebrating it, and we'll let you know how that's going to happen when John comes in a second. But you also might be thinking about what you're going to do for dinner, whether it be tonight, tomorrow night. How about Chicago's Pizza? And I've got just the answer for you here. We've been talking deep dish all day on the Pacers. What's the deep dish right there on what the Pacers need to do? And the deep dish on the Pacers and what they need to do that we just talked about, how about a deep dish pizza? Or it might be you want traditional. It might be that you actually are looking for something gluten-free. No problem. That option's there as well. You can dine in at Chicago's Pizza, or you can get it for carry-out. But we have a $30 gift card to give away right now for Chicago's Pizza. 18 Central Indiana locations, 25 statewide. You've heard why I love Chicago's. Because it's a family-owned business. Started in 1979, Indiana values all the way through and through. And the fact that each of the locations, the owner-operators are oftentimes people that started out working at Chicago's Pizza, just making the dough fresh every morning. Obviously, the salad bar with all the fixings fresh every day. You get that with the deep dish or traditional pizza buffet for just $13 and a soft drink. I mean, you can't beat it at lunchtime. But for dinner as well, perhaps carry out, always an option, chicagospizza.com. And we are going to give away right now a gift card for $30 to Chicago's for caller number what?
Well, Jake, tomorrow night is game number 6.
So we got to go
Pacers are
6,
going
right?
for win number 4.
Ooh, nice. Okay.
So are we going with 6 or are we going with 4?
Well, why don't we add the 2 together and divide it in half and go with 5?
Well, no, we can't do that because they just lost game 5.
Oh, that's an excellent point.
I think we go with
6
4.
I think we go.
We're going for the 4th win.
True. All right, we'll go 4.
Okay.
They need that 4th win to get to the finals. Caller number 4, you are on your way to Chicago's Pizza with the $30 gift card, and it's fabulous. I've had several people that have pointed out to me, as I'm very much appreciative, that they have gone and enjoyed the lunch buffet. They love it, and it is great. So I'm on my way to Detroit for the IndyCar event this weekend. That race on Saturday. Absolutely, we'll be watching the game on the race on Sunday. We'll be watching the game on Saturday. I think after the session tomorrow, I'm going to go into Windsor and buy like an embarrassing amount of ketchup potato chips at the Walmart in Windsor, and then go to Roots Canada and then bring back a case of Alexander Keith's for my buddy Rob Lynch. So nothing looks more fishy than when I'm crossing the border with like 23 bags of potato chips and 1 case of beer. I've been pulled over before. My car's been tossed for cigars, the whole deal. This time, though, innocent and innocuous. Going over, they don't think it's weird at all that I've been in Canada for a grand total of like an hour. And I always ask them to stamp my passport, and they say the same thing every year. What are you, 9? Yes, I am. Can you please stamp my passport? I like having my passport stamped. And I have a brand new passport now. My old one expired, so this will be the first stamp that I get. But I'm also hopeful that when I come back on Monday, we will be talking about and setting up for you a Pacers NBA Finals appearance with the Oklahoma City Thunder. 1 game left to get in that. That's going to be the big one. That's going to be the challenge, and that's not going to be easy because New York has their back against the wall. We saw it last night. New York was aggressive. New York was a little bit nasty. New York negated Tyrese Halliburton. New York negated Andrew Nembhard, and I would anticipate that those things are going to be the case again here. But the Pacer fans, you are going to be the difference. You're going to be the ones getting them fired up. You're going to be the ones getting them going, and if Halliburton is aggressive early, Turner hits an early shot, and I hope it's just this massive civic explosion of the energy in the building. I don't want it to be that nervous energy or even that fatigued, dissipating energy like we saw, because we definitely saw that after the race on Sunday. And there was a nervous energy as well, even though they got the win. You know, they're in game number 4. You can only imagine now, if people are seeing it starting to slip away just a little bit, what it's going to mean. Did we get a winner, Eddie?
We did. Shout out to Chris. But do we need to start making like a – so we're in the hallways here at the station.
That's right.
Do we start needing making plays like Earth the JMV, do you copy? Earth the JMV, do you copy?
JMV is getting prepared, Eddie, because, and I'll let him elaborate on this.
That's exactly why we're making the plea. JMV, please come to the studio. JMV, please come to the studio.
John's got a big night planned. And theoretically and hopefully, should everything go according to plan, he's got an even bigger Saturday night planned. And I'm not going to steal his thunder. That ain't my style.
Exactly. That's why I'm trying to make the call.
I'm not here to cramp on him. That ain't my style. So I can let him let you know what's going on tonight. We have a scheduling change for tonight on our sister station B105. We have a scheduling change potentially for tomorrow night, depending upon what happens at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. John will be in next. He'll explain all of it to you, and I will be with you on Monday at noon, hopefully talking NBA Finals on Query & Company. Have a great weekend.